I'm saying the bigger point I'm making is that he would not have crossed the floor from being on the backbenches of the Barbados Labour Party to come over to the Democratic Labour Party and be in the background. I think he would have fancied himself for where he now is. And in fancying himself for where he now is, he also knows the political behemoth that is Prime Minister Mia Mottley and who he would be coming up against. So he would know that we are having politics in Barbados where, as has been the tradition, but even more so now, the fate of the party is very much being decided on this question of leadership and who's the better leader. So yes, I very much think that going into the polls that there will be votes going for leadership on either side, and if we'll be looking tonight to see if he is able to win his seat, and what will it look like if there are seats won by the Democratic Labour Party, but he is not one of them. All of that is of interest. Can't wait for the numbers to start coming.
That's a cold, bloodless assessment. If I've ever heard one. I mean, I thought I was being cynical.
Politics, cold and bloodless.
Let's go now to Lorianne covering things from the vantage point of some of where that bloodletting was at George Street. If Lorianne can hear me, she can let us know what the mood is as the vote count is getting ready to begin.
Hi, Julius. Are you hearing me? I am not sure who this are. As you can see, we have just a few people at the back of us at the DLP headquarters. Right now, they are preparing for the vote count. Currently, the leader of the DLP, Mr. Ralph, is not here. According to the campaign manager and the general secretary, Mr. Petty Shepherd, they have not been able to reach Mr. Thorne, but what they are hearing is that Mr. Thorne was unable to vote today because his name was not found on the voters list. So currently, there is a bit of a confusion going on here at headquarters that this is the situation we're in, but they are still setting up to wait for the countdown and the vote.
So stay with us for a moment, Lorianne. I didn't quite get what you said in terms of being off the list and not being able to vote. Could you run through that and, to the extent possible, source that particular statement?
So according to his campaign, the party's campaign manager, Mr. Andrew Campbell, and the General Secretary, Mr. Pedro Shepherd, they both confirmed with me that Mr. Thorne, from what they understood, was unable to vote. But they also said they have not been able to reach him. They tried reaching out to him and they have not been able to reach him. But the word has been coming in at headquarters that Mr. Thorne was unable to vote because his name was not found on the voters list for him to vote. They were not able to confirm with me at which polling station he went to, but for now, this is the word that we're getting. He was unable to vote, and they are currently awaiting to find out what will happen next. But they are still setting up about 8 people behind me right now waiting for the vote count.
And Graham there at DLP headquarters at George Street. We will stay on that story and seek confirmation. 2 sources, I assume independently, and we've got a 2-source rule. If 2 people say independently that the sky is blue, then the sky is blue. But let's wait to hear from, as the saying goes, from the horse's mouth. And again, an instance where someone who made the loudest noise about the voters list is an apparent victim of it, if those reports are to be believed. I make sense of that. Pick sense from nonsense, if you will.
Oh boy, this is interesting. Look, the voters list, there's work that needs to be done. The EBC has to do better because every year there is the concern.
But hang on, you can go and check and know whether or not you're listed.
I'm coming to didn't the leader of the opposition check to see if he was there before he went to vote? Like, there were so many notices being placed on social media by the leading party and other media by the ruling party, the leading party, right now, the Barbados Party. I mean, that was the, I mean, at what point in time did you go check? You went today to vote without checking to see if you were listed? It's kind of weird to me, but that's where we are. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your point. Because I can, your bewilderment is palpable.
I'm sorry. I know people tell me I can't hide in my face. Everything shows on my face. I'm sorry.
Good, that's important.
But it is what it is. Yeah, it's just a crazy situation to me. And this is not to dismiss the fact that the list every single election season is a problem. And I mean, the point was made earlier that even the political parties, they have to get involved. You know, at the level of cleaning up their constituencies, not the political, but the politicians at the level of cleaning up in their constituencies and help with that process also. But at this stage, I mean, for a leader of a party to not be able to vote because he didn't check to see if he was on the list, it's just weird. It's just, that's not where we are.
Weird is your characterization, Professor Marshall? I mean, not taking into account the fact that you yourself were a victim of this.
But he's not the leader of a party.
You're not the leader of the party. He is. Doesn't he? Isn't it really incumbent upon him to check, to know whether he is on, one, and two, is this his way of calling into question the integrity of election if what we heard from Lorianne Graham, from the two bigwigs in the Democratic Labour Party, is to be believed? Ralph Thorne wasn't able to vote where he was supposed to vote today.
Well, just before I got here, I saw on social media this point being raised, and so we still have to get clarity as to what transpired. But from what I read, it appears that both he and his wife was able to vote in a particular area. They both went to vote in a particular area, and he was not assigned to that area. So that was a peculiarity, and he did not go to the next area where he was then assigned to go. So it's not a case where he was disenfranchised. It's a case of, from my reading, it's a case of him not registered to vote in a particular area, a particular constituency. So we'll wait further, but for me, the only puzzle, and that's why I say I prefer to wait to hear what's the principle he's standing on. For me, what's peculiar is that he did not go to give his colleague the support in the other riding where he was then assigned. But it might be that he's standing on principle that this is a bungling that has gone too far. And you know, but I suppose there'll be questions all around. You know, why did you not go and support your colleague? If you're leading a party and your colleague would benefit from the vote. There's another argument that would say, look, all these years, you or your wife are registered, living in a particular address, expected to vote in the address. Your wife gets through to vote, but then suddenly you're askance and askew, placed in a different area. And so it might be his moral outrage, so he just takes a stand. But I prefer to just wait and hear.
But it has led to, for the first time, Commonwealth and CARICOM observers being called in to view our elections. Our tradition is, we go look at Pakistan, we go look at South Africa.
I'm not embarrassed about these things. United States can't get it right yet. There's 200 years of a democracy, right? There was an election where there was this butterfly voting. I heard Peter saying they need to use the technology, but the technology went horribly wrong in that case in the state of Florida, where George W. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was the governor, and that rating went away. So in this case, it's an institution responsible for preparing a cleaned up list. By the time we're ready to have, by the time the electoral cycle matures, there's a little bit more extraordinary levels of anomalies, and they have to take the rap for that. But that is not a slight or anything to be embarrassed about. And I'm sure the election observers, I'm very familiar with this process, will not necessarily flag that as a flaw in terms of the quality of our democratic process. I think what they may signal is the need for the process within the EBC to be more disciplined and so on and so forth. Something has changed, the way in which enumerators have generated the list and so on. Something has changed.
The enumeration exercise.
Yes, I strongly believe something has changed.
The custom having 5 years and now they got 4.
Well, no, I think it's even beyond that. Someone was telling me that you ask postmen, they ask postmen and so on. I'm wondering about that whole process. We at the South Louis Institute, you at Cadres, we do routine exercises where we speak to, we try to canvass views through public opinion survey and so forth. And there's a way in which you do it. It's a tried and trusted way. I am surprised to hear about a different set of processes this time around on the part of this independent body, and I'm just wondering why they're proceeding in that way.
But I mean, when we had a cleaning of the list, so that the cleaning of the list is new, and has it had the time to be carried out the way that we'd be expected to carry out, or was the EBC thinking that they would have more time or the luxury of the extra year that was in which the election was constitutionally due? I'm not putting anything out there because at any day I don't know. What I will say is I don't like in the interim where we are here giving credence to reports on social media, because you do realize that it's entirely possible that you have people who are linked to political parties and set up burner accounts and put posts out there today, boost them, and so they're appearing in people's feeds essentially. There might be actual people, but at the end of the day, there are people who are putting stories out there on social media in public consumption to drive this story of quote-unquote stolen election forward. I'm not saying they're untrue, I'm not saying they're true. I'm saying I don't like taking cues from social media, and at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that we're in a situation where we will be jumping ahead, and the EBC situation is such as it is, and now you're having to believe those stories, or people will jump ahead and believe those stories.
So just to recap, according to our reporter Lorraine Graham at DLP headquarters, who's spoken to the General Secretary Pedro Shepard and the campaign manager for Ralph Thorne, the leader of the Democratic Labour Party, he was not able to vote. And we do not understand exactly what that means. Our understanding thus far is that he was registered, not in a constituency that he expected to be registered in. And we want to find out from Ralph Thorne, who has not been reachable so far this evening, exactly what happened up there. We're still waiting word on the count being underway at 26 minutes away from 9, and as soon as those first returns come in, Corey Sandiford will input those into his system and be able to tell us in the earliest returns what the situation will be like this night, as all 30 seats are up for grabs in the House of Assembly in this general election. We saw pictures coming in at Parkinson Memorial Secondary for St. Michael Southeast, at the Barbados Community College for St. Michael East, in Christchurch South. We saw pictures at the Cuthbert Pilgrim Memorial Hall there on Maxwell Road of the Transport Board buses bearing the boxes from the polling stations coming into the counting centre, which is Cuthbert Pilgrim for Christchurch South, and as I mentioned earlier, those counting centres where the count will begin, monitored by both political parties, other agents, and of course the EBC. And again, this is not to suggest that there's anything awry in terms of the integrity of this election, though it has to be said that the person who raised the loudest noise about the likely fairness of this election was indeed
Should have been the first to check his name on your list.
Ralph Thorne. So we'll find out about that. Raheem, up there at University of Oxford, we're a scholar studying public policy and law. What do you make of what you've heard thus far?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. I agree with the proposition that this is a referendum on the leader of the opposition. Obviously, once you defect to the other side and you have an election in which you have to fight, the truth is the extent to which you can go on later on as leader of the party will depend on your ability to win. I also do recognize that over time, I think the mass-based political parties in the region have attempted to shy away from engaging people in a broad-based way, even outside of the election. So something as simple as a mass-based meeting, even after some of these speeches in Parliament, as part of the sort of getting and testing the ground and understanding of where the parties are as part of getting ready for an election. Cognizant, by the way, that the opposition parties in this region, the DLP included, have always been calling for an election, right? Because that's just what they do until, of course, the election is called and the opposition parties then say, hey, let's take a bit longer. So you can't catapult into the seat of prime minister without winning a seat. What is interesting for me as well, though, is the extent to which the DLP, as part of this campaign, not only focused on domestic issues, but attempted to sort of make this discordance between the internationalism of Prime Minister Motley versus the domestic nature of Prime Minister Motley. And of course, maybe cadres and some of the other organizations could look into what is this sort of Barbadian perception of leadership, and does it matter to the ordinary Barbadian voter of how internationally recognized and renowned their political leader is? Cognizant, by the way, that the Barbados Prime Minister, for the most part, has always had a very great regional stature and internationalism. Prime Minister Arthur, going all the way back to independence. So that for me is critical. In relation to the sort of voting today, Professor Marshall brought up the idea that I hadn't even thought about, that yes, you may not have been enfranchised in this particular place, but as the leader of the political party, there is a requirement, at least innately, to say, hey, I have to go over there and give my skipper or my friends some support as well. But of course, we know the strategy of politics. We know in this sort of social media era of drumming up support for the particular cause, that would say, hey, if I couldn't vote, and I'm guessing that this is the argument that's going to be made, if I couldn't vote and I'm the leader of this party, well, what of ordinary people across the length and breadth of this country? I do not think it is a badge of shame for anybody as part of the international observers. I think it is a very good way to test the democracy and to be able to build on it and have international agencies provide a litmus test and considerations that you say that these are the things that we need to be able to work on. But tonight, clearly, of course, once we hear from the leader of the opposition, we will be able to have a clearer sense of what the sort of ideological position is about not voting or not being able to, among other considerations. So for me, that is part of the sort of interesting, and it may just be a first as part of this election.
Right, thank you very much for that. It's 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock, awaiting the first returns from the general election of 2026. A quick look at where the buses have been rolling in. Our reporters have been sending us pictures throughout the evening, and in a moment we'll join our roving reporter, Corinne Smith, somewhere in this country to give us a feel of what the day has been in this day, election day.
St. Michael Northwest, too close to ignore. St. Michael Northwest is shaping up as one of the tighter races as the general election enters its final stretch. The constituency is being contested by incumbent Neil Rowe of the Barbados Labour Party, Democratic Labour Party candidate Ryan Walters, and Ricardo Williams of the Friends of Democracy. With 3 candidates on the ballot and all sides active on the ground, this is a contest where margins, turnout, and late momentum could prove decisive. As election day approaches, St. Michael Northwest remains firmly in the too close to ignore category.
I'm here at the Ellerslie Secondary School in St. Michael Northwest constituency. This is the official counting station for the constituency of St. Michael Northwest. Thus far, there's not a whole lot of activity, but there's quite a bit of anticipation. Election officials, journalists are here awaiting the arrival of 14 boxes. Now, I just spoke with Returning Officer Charles Keynes, who said there is already 1 box situated here, as this is also a polling station at Ellerslie School, and they are awaiting another 14. He says there are just over 7,000 registered constituents to vote in this election, and of course, we will bring you more details as they become.
For a moment, because that's an interesting development there. So the polling district that is Ellerslie, obviously the box is going to stay there. We're going to be joined by the other polling districts' boxes, and that hasn't happened yet. At 19 minutes away from 9, so that's interesting. It is a. And this is perhaps why. Perhaps this is why Professor Marshall and Corey stand for the rain black, but that does not yet seem to be the case. But earlier, though, this is a story over in St. Peter going up north. Pictures there of the bus already there. bearing the polling district boxes for that constituency at the Coleridge and Parry School. The counting center is there, and St. Peter is interesting because it has bits of St. Andrew in there as well, and St. Lucie are in that constituency. And there we have the city of Bridgetown. The agents are getting off a smaller bus, and the boxes at the Donald Henry Auditorium at the Bethel Methodist Church there in Bay Street, where the counting is set to begin. That was moments ago in the city of Bridgetown. So the boxes have arrived at St. Peter and at the city of Bridgetown, but not quite yet in St. Michael Northwest, which is going to be too close to ignore. It's not on the list of the ones to watch according to your data. What kind of swing will be required for Muro to be ejected by Ryan Walters based on the figures and the polling that you would have done, cadres would have done earlier?
Yeah, well, you're putting me on the spot here, so to pull out the numbers, but the swing is usually, the swing is usually in the teens. That's the main thing to bring money for the, to dislodge any one candidate. You have the ones that are more marginal, which is the ones that we were speaking to earlier, but for the most part, the teens and the high teens, yes, is the sort of swing. And just for the sake of the viewers, when you start talking about swing, I know you start getting maybe a little bit esoteric for people, but the swing, like a 1% swing or a 5% swing in the election, in a quote-unquote normal election where the political parties, you have both parties represented in parliament, could usually mean a very different thing. A 5% swing could change a government in some countries. But when you start talking about high teens, that's a lot of voters. Like, the voters really got to turn out in the numbers, as opposed to the current context where the word on the street, as I was saying earlier, in the minds and mouths of Barbadians is voter apathy and people not going out to vote. So it was really necessary for the opposition, specifically the DLP and the newer parties, we'll call these smaller parties, the newer parties to really move people in their numbers and really energize them enough to get out and vote this election. So that's really the question mark now as we wait patiently for these boxes to come in.
Indeed. Professor Don Marshall, have a thought, spare a thought for the incredible amount of money that a political party needs to mobilize voters. Radio and TV and social media don't elect people. People elect people. And to do that, you've got to provide the buses, you've got to provide the taxis, you've got to provide the food and drink to get people to vote on election day. And it costs a lot of money. And to my mind, last time I checked, I don't recall any campaign finance legislation being talked about at all. We've been talking about integrity in public life, we've been talking about prevention of corruption, not campaign finance reform, to find out where the money goes or is needed to go, or whether elections should be publicly funded.
Very good summary there, Julius, and I couldn't have said that any better. There's a need for campaign finance reform, but you know, we come here every cycle and we say the same thing. And the truth of the matter is that there's the advantage of incumbency when it comes to the question of access to finance. So whether it's the Democratic Labour Party, that's the government, or it's the Barbados Labour Party, that is the government, there's an advantage that incumbents enjoy over their rivals. But of course, there's also another side that we need to take a look at, corporate buyout. Now, you can get the corporate sector being involved in democratic elections and exercises, which could pervert the causes that drive people present a raft of measures that would be kernel to their mandate. The other competing interests come from the corporate side that have funded your campaign, that have funded the individual candidates, and that have kept your presence on social media.
This is where you talk about such things as crony capitalism, state capture.
That's where you get state capture. Sure, that's where you get a situation where a party, campaigns in rhetoric and then rule in prose, a sort of bait and switch, where people say, but hang on, you baited me with a set of measures and so on. Why is it you're switching up? Well, there's a invisible hand at work, and that invisible hand, those corporates and individuals and philanthropists that are sort of investing shrewdly into politics because they expect a particular return. And why we speak about the need for campaign finance reform across all liberal democracies is because we want to ensure that the will of the people remains sacrosanct. You know, and there's nothing wrong with lobbying. Different interest groups lobbying, contributing, but when you get transparency, for example, in the donations, what that does is that if there's an inadvertent piece of legislation or set of policy measures being put in place that betrays the public trust, you can get a sense in which where that's coming from, you know, based on what's going on with the donations, right? So we need the transparency, which is the kernel thing behind the campaign finance reform.
And publicly funded elections. Possible? Make sense?
It makes sense. For example, when Barbados is one of those countries that's, I think, under Prime Minister Arthur came up with a very useful and stellar idea of ensuring that there's a subvention that parties that win seats in the House will receive to help contribute to the to their upkeep and so on. And I think that is in the best tradition of what is required, because when you're wholly reliant on corporates and philanthropists, then you, again, political parties subject to capture. You're just keeping it real.
Right. A few moments ago, some pictures from the Garfield Sobers Gymnasium, and I can tell you that the counting is underway for the constituency of Christchurch East Central. So that's underway. The nomination center was the Milton Village Primary School, so that stretches all the way from Water Street, includes such places as Newton and across to St. David's, and then west of the Garfield Sobers Gymnasium, the counting station there for the ballot. So the counting is underway in Christchurch East Central, and we look forward to the early returns in this election. Now, without revealing too much, Ayo Oloyara, you've been interested in the impact of business on party politics. Your view on what Professor Don Marshall has said?
Of course, I agree with Professor Marshall.
Well, please disagree. It's going to be a long night.
No.
Let's have some fun.
Let me just say what I would say also is, so not dismissing what he said, but also, good, is the reality that it is, because there's a lot of discussion on integrity legislation. This comes under that broad heading, yeah? But there's no political party in Barbados that's going to institute or rather pass integrity legislation. Within both parties, they stop at the upper house. They've not got past the upper house with the legislation. Why? Because it doesn't benefit them if they're the government. It removes a lot of the room for them to have political strategy, for them to and you were talking earlier about fixed states election. That removes a lot of power from the Prime Minister to basically control her cabinet, which is important, all right, to a sitting Prime Minister. I say her, but I mean him or her. I've gotten accustomed over the years to say her, all right, but I mean him or her. So all these are things that I think they're nice to say, and they're good to have, and they would be good to have if we want a more ordered society. So there's no denying that, but it removes so much of the play from within the whole political space that it makes it almost like,
I could tell you, if you could switch to public campaign finances, a lot of people can be real disappointed with the show.
Many.
Like this whole show that we've got, this
The setting, the concerts, the big noise and so on.
young brother playing
The
plastic.
state taxpayers can't afford that.
Like it's a different show, and we want to see the magic. We've got accustomed to the magic, so not all of that will go away, and we would have to get accustomed to a completely new
Reality.
political setup for campaigns.
Yeah, but-
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we have to get accustomed to it.
Don't want to talk about the unseen hand of economics coming into play, and you're campaigning in.
From behind the institutions, we're talking about from the voter, the electorate, and what the electorate is now looking for in a campaign. Should you want, what this is part of why the smaller newer parties struggle to make that impact. They can't campaign on the same level. They can't sustain the presence in the public outside of elections and might be able to attract some funding during elections, but then they got that 4 or 5 year period in between elections where they have to attract funding to be able to talk about the same sort of, it's Raheem, right, that's joined us via Zoom, is the same sort of meetings outside of the election campaign period. All of that takes money. The lighting takes money. The audio takes money. Setting up platforms takes money. And we don't like to think about that as voters, but that is the reality.
I disagree for the first time.
Yes, finally. Disagreement makes a horse race.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, the drive to capture minds and hearts, what the political parties are about. And right now what's in vogue is to entertain. Okay, to entertain the dry fit shirt, the cap, the paraphernalia, the fish cakes, and we're going to bust a crowd and so on. And we're going to have some entertainment, and in between there we'll do some consciousness raising about the measures that we want to put before you. And that formula is a useful formula because it's quite Caribbean in some respects, we love a party and so on and so forth. But I also see in this region an absorbing interest that various publics had with Obama's campaign in the United States. Stick a pin, stay with me. Obama's campaign was mesmerizing for its messaging. Yes, we can. And so on and so forth. I go back to, so I might be dating myself, to electoral cycles a few years back. And we've had campaigns that did not necessarily rely on the songs and the effects and the pageantry and so on and so forth, but the messaging was effective. And when we were talking about economic democracy, I'm just using that as a theme, when that excited imaginations. I mean, today we asked, what was that about? But that excited imaginations, and a number of us voting for the first time were captivated by that. Don Blackman on the platform reminded us of the sociology, the history of the place. You've had subsequently, so 2018, let me go to 2018 to just give the balance. The speeches that Mia Mottley was giving, Prime Minister Mia Mottley was giving in 2018 were grounded in decolonization outlooks. Today she doesn't talk that talk. There's not that much talk. I went to several of those meetings. She was not just exercising the gift of great speech, but she was resonating on social justice fronts in a way that excited the public imagination. I do think there's a role for lifting consciousness without necessarily having to resort to bring the entertainers and so on stage. And the more we go that route, the more the issues become light, and the more dumbed down the consciousness is. I have to be very frank. Yeah, but I think we're in the midst of a festival of dumb.
In the social media era where there's a lot of...
We're a festival of dumb where the issues are, we hold politicians to very low standards and the politics remain transactional. Largely because if you dumb down the discourse and keep them distracted in fets and partying, then you don't have to give an account for why the public economy, for why immersive foreign earning. We don't have to deal with hard questions. We just keep them entertained.
But circuses.
Correct.
But it takes money.
Don't you worry. I will do the work.
Yeah.
So may I disagree with you now?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Yes.
And then I have to disagree after.
I agree that in 2018, the Prime Minister's messaging was a lot about decolonization because there was a particular mission at hand. One, republicanism. That was being entered into the conversation. So, of course, I believe that at the time, that conversation had to be had, removing the Nelson and all these types of things. What I think is, we've achieved that. All right? I also disagree with you on the fact that the messaging has been dumbed down. Because yes, there is the entertainment and so forth, but one of the things that the Prime Minister has do, sorry, is she still the Prime Minister? We don't know.
Yeah, she's still the Prime
Well,
Minister.
yeah, she is.
the Prime Minister.
This is true.
Sworn in.
Yeah. Is that she's captured the youth vote in a huge way. That has been happening quietly over the last 7 years.
Debating. So be careful when you say the youth vote. That can be measured.
It can be measured. But what I've seen, I taught a class the other day. They were
These are minority-led governments, yeah?
but still, they matter. All right, and the class had like 25 people, and I just asked the question because I try not to get into people's minds too much, you know. But yeah, so y'all voting because they're like between 19 and 22, I think the age group was, and they said, of course. One said, "Nah, I don't get involved." One person.
One. Yeah.
That is actually unique. No, because before they would be like, "Nah, we don't get involved in that," and they said, "Are we voting for me?"
What kind of class was this? I mean, you got to ask how representative would that be of what going on?
That's not
Fair.
That said,
not scientific.
an old wise history teacher of mine once said, whenever you want to look at a trend, don't look at Barbados. Every country, Barbados behaves very differently from everybody else. St. Lucia had a minority electing a government and actually gaining a seat for the majority in the St. Lucia Labour Party. Do you think really that a minority will vote in this election?
Well, it seems possible, but I mean, all kinds of numbers are being spit all over the place right now, so I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening there. It makes me a little uncomfortable when we talk about this. No, the 42% voting in the last election, because the list would have had on
A lot of
dead people,
right.
people who were not living here, and it continues to. So, I mean, I was having a conversation the other day on a podcast, and we were saying that the list will always be dirty, and that's essentially an extension of what Peter Wicker was saying,
Yes.
where the minute that somebody is registered, somebody will die, and the list will be dirty all over again. So it will never be 100% clean. But at the same time, when we're talking about who voted and who did not vote up until 2022, it still would have had on that 42%. Like, it could have been higher if the list could have been cleaner. Is the basic point that I'm trying to put out. I can't argue. I find it difficult to argue when we're talking about Prime Minister Mia Mottley. In terms of attracting the youth vote, because the young people that have come up and vote have largely voted for the BLP. You have to look at the numbers now and see how many did not vote for, and if the extent to which that is true, that she is mobilizing young people. Yes, the ones that did vote voted for her. You can't argue at that point. But what is it going to look like in this election? Are young people feeling disaffected with what's going on in the country, and do they see their vote having meaning? That's really the thing, that is the question, that one of the questions that's on my mind as we head into the election. We didn't have a youth manifesto from the political parties this to us.
Indeed. It's 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 11th of February, 2026. The votes have begun to be counted in at least one constituency that we can tell you about, and we'll bring the results to you as they come in. But for the moment, let's head due east to St. Philip West and Kareem Smith at Princess Margaret.
Yes, thank you, Julius. We just journeyed across the Princess Margaret Secondary School in St. Philip West, as you said, from the Ellerslie School in St. Michael Northwest, where voting had not yet started, but some of the boxes were trickling in. Here at Princess Margaret, all of the boxes, as far as I understand, have arrived in 2 charter buses from the Transport Board. And there's quite a bit of activity here. However, there's no voting has started as yet. No counting has started as yet. There are 2 observers I've seen in the back of the auditorium from the Commonwealth. But this is a very hotly contested seat, and one which I think Barbadians will be paying quite a lot of attention to. The candidates contesting the seat are incumbent Kay McConney of the Barbados Labour Party, Dr. David Estwick, who is a former member of parliament under the Democratic Labour Party up until 2018, a seasoned campaigner, and one who is some person who is keenly listened to as well by the public, some person who is very opinionated and strong on the platform. And Miss Karina Goodridge from the Friends of Democracy last election in 2022, she would have contested the seat under the Solutions Barbados. This time around, she contests as president of the Friends of Democracy. And this seat is being keenly watched as well because of the closeness of the margins from the last time around, where the BLP's Kay McConney would have only secured 50.2%, enough to secure a victory, but it was one of the closer seats. Of course, Dr. Eswick would have amassed 41.6% of the vote, and the remaining number would have been split amongst third parties. I was not in this constituency today, but from the reports that I've gotten from some of our journalists on the ground and from residents as well, is that the voter turnout appeared to be slow. There was not a lot of activity, I'm told, at polling stations. However, of course, once the voting gets underway, we will have a better idea of how many persons would have exercised their civic duty in this constituency.
Stay with me for a moment. We spoke earlier, Kareem, and we went a bit on this whole question of civic involvement and responsibility and so on. And an interesting conversation that you had earlier today with someone who cast their ballot properly and fair and square and everything, but the motive or the thinking behind doing so, and what that said to you about their level of assumed knowledge, or our assumption of their level of knowledge of their civic responsibility.
Yes, well, I was in one of the St. Michael constituencies, St. Michael Northeast, where I must say, just from my observations over about 3 or 4 hours, there were quite a number of people coming out to vote, including young people, which is something that was quite heartening. But I was having a number of conversations with persons on the ground. There's one, as you noted, that stands out. I was speaking to a gentleman who is in his 50s, and he admitted that he is not a regular voter. And he went to the polling station. He was very, very happy with the process. He reported that it was smoothly waited about 15 to 20 minutes. But he reported to me that he confided in me the person who he intended to vote for. And as he was talking me through the process, it sounded to me as though he may have voted for the wrong person in error. And he indicated to me that the person he intended to vote for, that their stated address on the ballot paper was not an address that was in his constituency, and therefore he would have placed his X. He would have assumed that where he ought to have placed his X was next to the candidate whose address was actually in the constituency. And I think for me, it was very clear, and I think that he was a bit embarrassed. But I think it was very clear that perhaps just a bit of public education, civic education, things that we take for granted that people know and understand as they're moving to the polling stations and they participate in these types of processes, we might assume that they know. I think it's important that persons have a full understanding of exactly the process, the minute details, the things that we take for granted, so that when they do exercise their right, they are, fully satisfied that what they intended to do is what was done.
Here at the Princess Margaret Secondary School in Six Roads, which is the counting center for St. Philip West, and we can now tell you that in St. James North at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School, just off the Ronald Map Highway, Highway 2A, just south of Bakers, there is counting underway. Those are earlier pictures, but we can tell you the count is well and truly underway in St. James North. And St. James is also an interesting, if only for academic purposes for many people, as to how politics will run there. St. James South as well, where the count will take place at Queen's College for that constituency. And as you just saw, Kareem, there at St. Philip West, where it will be the McConney Estwick show. Ayo, your thoughts? We'll come back to you in a moment, I'm being told. So nobody go anywhere, and you neither, unless you get a very cool drink after this.
I feel like a no vote is also a vote, so whatever I decided to do before I came here would definitely impact going forward in terms of the government and stuff. And I personally, I resonate well with what the party that I voted for would have put forward. So then I decided, you know what, just let me come out, cast my vote, and hopefully it goes in the favor of who I decided to vote for. Yeah.
And would you say that that sentiment or the enthusiasm that you have expressed to participate in this process, do you feel like that's a sentiment that is shared among your peers?
No. Honestly, I've asked a couple of friends this morning if they were going to vote, and a lot of people said no, which is their right as well. We have the right to and not to, but I believe persons of my age, persons in general, should come out and cast their vote.
Did they say white women coming out?
They just said no, honestly, yeah. And
finally, as a young person, what are some of the issues when you look around your constituency, your country by extension? What would you consider to be the issues that were on your mind as you made your decision?
Not any major issues. One that I can think about is, like, one major issue would be crime and stuff, and then like the cost of living, and that's what I think is pushing a lot of people to commit the robberies and like those crimes around that area. But one thing I would say is the roads as well. The roads, garbage is an issue, especially in my specific neighborhood. There's been a pile up. I'm just hoping that small issues like that and then major issues such as crime would be fixed.
How was the voting process?
It was good. It was okay.
Okay. How long have you been voting?
From the time I was 18, and now I'm 75.
Okay. Do you find that the process has gotten easier over the years?
I wouldn't say it has gotten easier, but because it took a little while. I voted this morning in my area, right? And so I wouldn't say that it was easier. It's too many. You have to go to one person, they're calling your ID number. You have to go to another person, they're calling your ID number. That's quite annoying.
Okay. So if the process, you prefer a more seamless, so you think it was easier before?
I would think so, yes.
Okay.
And where before, if someone was unable to actually put their own X, you could fill a form and do that for them. Apparently, you don't do that anymore. It has changed.
Okay. Because I know they said that for some people who might be disabled,
yeah,
that they have to make a declaration, an oral declaration on entry. Okay. So was that the process you had to go through with her?
She didn't need that.
Okay.
Yeah. I just asked a question in case, and they told me that they don't do that any longer. But I guess the oral declaration, yes. But before, as I said, they could fill a form, but they told me they couldn't do that anymore. That the returning officer is the one who would have to do that for her.
Oh.
That's what she told me.
Wow.
I can do it for myself.
Yeah, we understand that, but just ask a question.
Okay, understood. All right, well.
And I was happy to vote.
You were happy to vote?
Yes.
That's good.
You're voting for change.
I made the best man win. That's all I have to say.
All right,
who
wonderful.
The best man winning.
Okay,
You're
great.
voting for change.
Okay,
thank you. Can you give me your name, ma'am?
Heather.
Heather?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
From the Gen, as near as I can tell, the Gen Z generation, and from someone who's been voting since they were a teen and they're now in their 70s. Just to let you know that the counting has begun in the Lawrence T. Gay Memorial School, which is the counting center for St. Michael West Central. If you're not seeing results, it's not that we're keeping them from you, it's just that the returns have not yet been coming in, those boxes need to be counted. It is the A to Z, and then or in some cases the A to H, and then the H to Z, and then that has to be compiled, and then that has to be entered, and then we know. So that's not the case just yet. So don't think that we're holding any results from you. We just we haven't received any yet, and that's the case across the competitors. So there's no need going away to anybody else. Those votes have not yet been counted, but the counting is underway. And so far as I can tell, 4 or so constituencies, by my reckoning, at 12 minutes past 9. Now let's look at some other pictures coming in from, there's Emmanuel Joseph, who is standing by. And are you ready to talk to us now, Manny Joseph? Right, Manny can't hear us quite yet. We'll come back to him. So we're waiting for the very early returns to come in, and then we'll get an idea as to where this night is headed. And I have to say, having covered the general election in St. Lucia, where we didn't have to do too much work. The Electoral and Boundaries Commission was sending us the information electronically on the screen, showing the nice bar charts and everything. Little old St. Lucia and Barbados, with this much vaunted antediluvian democracy, still pretty much with a few twerks or changes, pretty much the same way since voting was done for every one of us in 1951.
Every one of us. Speak for yourself.
Well, in terms of universal, in case you just doing this, that joke is really intended for those who were here from the beginning, who would know that Professor Don Marshall is not among the every one of us, because for some inexplicable reason he could not find his name as being duly registered to vote any constituency this day. The Electoral and Boundaries Commission will say you had ample time to go and check, but you said up to 2 days you were trying to check the EBC. So shall we rattle on your knuckles, or is this a statement of your dissatisfaction with the system? So just to let you know, this is what he said all this, but you know exactly what he meant. Universal adult suffrage for all of us since 1951, and we've been doing it pretty much the same way, with the exception of the sheet with the numbers being called out, your national registration number, that came in after independence, but it's been the same way over and over again. And in this social media era, I certainly detected in talking to people a bit of discomfort with that same old way of voting.
Don't let's discuss trust. Yeah? Trust in the integrity of the process is paramount. And what I appreciated the very good points that earlier Peter Wicker would have made about, the fact that we as digital natives get accustomed to doing things electronically and so on. And since the dawn of the Internet of Things, there's a way in which life is a lot more digitized than before. I want to put an accent on trust. We've built a lot of trust around the process, staid and conservative and traditional and even old-fashioned as it is. When we find the 75-year-olds participating in the exercise today and expressing a high degree of trust based on the familiarity of things, that's a good thing. While it's true millennials will feel a little bit uncomfortable, I think when we get through this exercise, barring the kinks that we've discussed about the EBC, and that's an independent body, we will still feel satisfied that the will of the people was expressed. But,
Can democracy die by atrophy as much as by, intent of bad actors? That a system that becomes antiquated and doesn't move with the culture could actually, because we only, as you know, democracy is the will of the governed consenting to be governed. And they could simply say, look, I've had enough of this process, and they can...
The process can actually become passe, while democracy can still thrive. Well, it seems paradoxical. You see, if you believe democracy is about good governance and allowing for inclusion, transparency, participation, civic participation and engagement, then long after the 2 seconds we exercise every 5 years, the life of the democracy thrives on the basis of civic engagement, people feeling that they're part of the legislative process, people feel they're part of the decision making, there's effective lobbying, people feel they can, we have town hall meetings, people participate, you can express themselves on the talk shows. If those things are happening, if there's great civic engagement, then we won't quite feel like democracy has atrophied.
Okay.
Right? But I do take the point that the electoral process still is symbolic and it's actually something that we need to work on and improve upon. But democracy doesn't end in just 2 seconds.
I just want to tell you that. Okay?
Yeah, fair enough.
These terms get thrown around.
That's right. That's right. I agree. Yes.
There we go. And we've birthed Gen Alpha and Gen Z.
So this is no longer a general election, it's a generational election.
I also participated in help birthing Gen Z.
Okay.
There you go.
That's post 1994?
Still think about millennials as children. We're 40.
Emmanuel Joseph, who is very much of my generation and older, who's been around covering general elections since the 1970s, so he has an eye on how things have changed or not changed. But he's nodding, but I think he's nodding because he.
We're here at the Barbados Labour Party headquarters on Roebuck Street.
If at BLP headquarters, go right ahead.
We're here at the Barbados Labour Party headquarters on Roebuck Street. Well, there's a lot of music in the air. The party music is blaring, and some fans are here, some supporters are camped out, and they brought their chairs for a long night in anticipation for the final results in general elections today. And the road has been blocked off as a thoroughfare. This is normally a busy street, but we expect that there will be blocked off later tonight by crowds of people in their red, supporters of the Barbados Labour Party. Now the food vendors are also out in their numbers, and they're ready to make a brisk trade here on Roebuck Street. So until further developments, this is Emmanuel Joseph from the Barbados Labour Party headquarters for Barbados Today.
Roebuck Street, and again, it's not a massive festive atmosphere at any of these locations because by and large this is going to be almost a sleeper of an election. But let me hear from you again, Professor Marshall, about.
You turn to me. One of the things that I've noticed that we don't quite talk about the health and well-being of the candidates that participate in this process. It's not by accident. When I heard earlier that Ralph Thorne couldn't be found, couldn't be contacted, I well recall a few nights coverage. A number of the candidates tend to either seek solace or rest. After this intense campaign, 6 o'clock comes, when 6 o'clock comes and the last vote has been casted, they normally retreat to either solitude or a place of quiet rest, and an election agent or a close ally aide or whoever will alert them at a particular hour, say 3-4 hours later. So I'm not surprised that both the headquarters of the major parties look a bit sparse. It's not that there's cold feet. A number of key persons are just taking it, dialing down. Recharging, and you'll see some activity around 11. That's when people get a sense of the results and so on and so forth. So I just thought to say that because we forget that these larger-than-life characters are actually human, and this has been a grueling 3 weeks.
Let's get Raheem Joseph, who's been listening from his vantage point in Oxford to weigh in on this. You've heard about this whole question of voter apathy, or is it the question of the antiquated nature of our general election system, and whether democracy can die by apathy or not. You heard the voices of a young voter and an older voter. And just as I say this, this is where the counting has begun. In St. Andrew, at St. Philip South, in St. Thomas, the counting is underway. In St. Michael East, in St. James North, in St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael Southeast, St. Michael Central, Christchurch East Central, and Christchurch West. We're going to keep that on the screen for you, just to let you know, if you've just joined us at 21 minutes past 9, what the state of play is. No returns have come in just yet, but the counting is underway in those 10 constituencies, while Raheem Augustine Joseph weighs in on what he's heard thus far this evening.
Yeah. I want to go back to an earlier point made by Professor Marshall. I mean, I disagree to some extent, but I think he will agree with me that it's about the balance. Every time I think about Caribbean politics and the fanfare, I always get amused by how much there is, but I understand that it's part and parcel of the Caribbean culture, to the extent that cricket, in a way that I guess the English and the others would not particularly see as being modest and being how best do I describe it? Being the traditional method of batting, whether it be Saviv and the others saying, really turning the tradition on its head. And I think that is really what Caribbean politics has become. This sort of rewriting of the traditional, boring, if you want to call it that word, benign process, whereby people throughout the entire day have so many things to think about. And therefore, this limited representative democracy has been borrowing that sort of right to somebody else to make these decisions. So I agree with Ayo, who mentioned that, hey, I don't know that over time or even in this campaign, that there was so much time given to entertain that I took away from the sort of platform speeches. I guess we could debate about the extent to which some of the deep issues were discussed. But one thing I enjoy about the Barbados election season, and just the Barbados exceptionalism that former Prime Minister Gonzalez speaks about, is the ability to discuss these issues. And when I watch the platforms, I heard a distilling of it in a sort of long epistle way, which is good. But obviously, I think people within the Caribbean enjoy the fanfare that is sprinkled around it, whether it be the music, which in and of itself also tells a message, whether it be the performances from Young Bread or anybody else, that also has a messaging that coalesces with what the political party messaging is at the time. One thing I think that also maybe overlooked as part of this campaign is the extent to which that the ruling party was able to utilize and capitalize on social media and technology to be able to, I guess, reach people and engaging people. From very early, I realized Prime Minister Motley, being the social media titan that she is, then sort of moved into the TikTok spaces and other spaces. And I'm not knocking down the DLP, but I'm saying it says something about a party's ability to retain and find talent among certain demographics that kind of widen the base of the support. Now, obviously, campaign finance limits the extent to which you can do so. But for example, if you go on the Instagram profile of the leader of the opposition now, you will still see pictures of him in a red shirt. Now that tells something, and these things matter. Perception in politics is very important. Of course, I don't have the data to suggest in any way, shape, or form how this influences anything, and I don't think it probably does. But I'm saying that the BLP, as part of this campaign, relied very heavily on this sort of technology focus, and I think that may be critical as part of the modern-based political party. There needs to be, again, as part of the whole polity, that level of balance, so that the issues are distilled and they focus in a very serious way, and people leave with a sort of classical, I guess, education and consciousness building about where the country is and where the country needs to go and how they're thinking about the Barbadian society that they want to be part of. But I think that is sort of where we are at this sort of idea of this campaigning. But I agree with Professor Marshall, at least in the last iteration, that politicians, it's easy for us to knock on politicians in this region. As a matter of fact, politicians, the cricket umpire, the football referee, the calypsonians, get the most lashes. But something has to be said about their ability over time to be able to withstand some of the pressure and deal with some of these things, the personal life, the intense campaigning. And I think obviously, yes, they sign up to be judged and misjudged, but I think at times we have to spare thought as well for their own mental health at this time, particularly knowing that if you come out or if even internally somebody know that you're seeing this professional or you're talking to this professional about some of your difficulties, you are seen as weak among other things, and that is problematic. So yeah.
Thank you, Raheem, for that. Let me talk about messaging. I know you want to weigh in on this, but the old jaded reporter would say, nobody reads manifestos. Nobody really is into the message, the overarching message, whether it's about decolonization or not. It's what have you done for me lately, and whether I'm feeling it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you see, when I'm thinking messaging, I'm agreeing with the young man Raheem about the overall messaging within the campaign, because the same thing he was saying just now, and we've exhausted this a little bit on the podcast, but over time, and it's funny that he came and said it, that the leader of the opposition is still on his social media in a red shirt. Do you understand that? No. This is where Don and I will stray a little bit on the path, because somebody in Don's Professor Ayers' group is not going to necessarily see that as a problem. Younger generation, do you understand how when I say that the Prime Minister, whoever young voters are coming, she's capturing those because she understands that messaging and how to put it out there in the best way. There were so many follow-ups on the Democratic Little Party's platform that were, to me, so embarrassing because of how easy they were to get done. Something I
Own
said.
goals? They were own goals?
Yes.
Against, scoring an own goal.
Yeah, they were own goals. And something as simple as if you pull down the manifesto, is it compressed? I mean, some simple little things that, do you understand? That tells you, the person who knows what's going on, do these people know what they're doing?
It's like non-verbal communication. You're sending a different message.
Exactly. So that's
whether you're really ready.
I'm talking about readiness. Yes.
All right. So again, let me just show you where the counting has begun in the constituencies thus far on this night of the count. We saw at least 10 constituencies where the counting has begun, and apparently I'm being told that list is being added, so we can't show that to you just yet, but I can at least tell you that 10 constituencies out of the 30, the counting, we can tell you, has actually started. We are awaiting the very first results. One of the earliest, the city of Bridgetown, that was on the list, and now the list has been amended, and there we are. So let's just quickly go through them. At the Alling School, the count has begun for the constituency, the single parish constituency of St. Andrew. Down from that, there's St. Philip South at the Faith New Testament Church of God, there at Curtains in St. Philip, the count has begun. In St. John at the Log School, Messiah Street, or Society Plantation, depending on your point of view, we're adding to that list, as you can see, the count is underway. In St. Thomas, the counting has started at the Duncan Seymour Center at Sharon Moravian Church. Then we're doing this right on the fly, so you know exactly what's happening. In St. Michael East, the vote is underway at the Barbados Community College. To St. Michael South Central, the count underway at the St. Michael School. St. James North, the count is underway at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School. Over at St. George North, at St. George Secondary, the bus a long time arrived. The boxes are in the counting center, and they're being counted for St. George North. The story is also the case in St. Lucie at the Darrell Jordan Secondary School in the Eiffel and Phillips Auditorium. The count underway for St. Lucie. For St. Michael North, the count underway there. St. Michael North, the Eden Lodge Primary School. At St. Michael Southeast, the count is underway. Another keenly expected contest there at the Parkinson Memorial Secondary School. The count will begin. Over to St. Michael Central, another area of interest. St. Michael are also always an area of interest, but the St. Michael Central at the Common School, the count is underway. No returns in just yet from any of these constituencies. Over at the Garfield Sobers Gymnasium, the count is underway for the Christchurch East Central constituency. So at the moment, we'll take a break and come right back here on Decision 2026 Election Pulse from Barbados Today.
Welcome to the Western Sales Center, the home of quality products, excellent service, and of course, great prices. Come on, let's check it out. We've extended our product selection to offer a new and exciting range of products, from personal care items to household essentials, to meat and veg, and everything else in between. We are open Monday to Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., giving you plenty of time to browse and stock up. Come on down to the Western Sales Center, the heartbeat of Western, where great quality, products, and excellent prices are in store.
There goes your client, ruining your night's rest again.
I got this.
With our online shop, it's a hassle-free instant booking process for your audio and video equipment. You see availability, set your pickup and drop-off times, and get the final price of your order instantly. Pay via cash, card, or direct bank transfer. We know Miss Panic is definitely getting a markup for ruining your beauty sleep. Summit Media and Event Rentals. Imagine the possibilities.
Life happens, even for the most experienced athletes. That's why Bayview Urgent Care is here. With no appointment needed, you can walk right up to our front desk and be greeted by caring and professional staff who are there to guide you through our intake process. Our dedicated and highly trained nurses and doctors in the urgent care department provide thorough examinations and talk you through the next steps. Need immediate blood work? Bayview Laboratory is conveniently located on the second floor. Need x-rays or scans? Diagnostic radiology is also located within Bayview Urgent Care. Once you are on the mend and ready to go home, our patient shuttle is able to take you where you need in comfort. Bayview Hospital's new urgent care is perfectly equipped to provide you with a full circle of care. Call us at 433-9999 to find out more.
4 years ago, there was only a global pandemic, and that really made things very difficult for those of us who were counting a general election then. We were all in separate rooms. We couldn't put on a mask and talk to you, but it was a shorter night because somehow the system performed a little differently than it did in 2018. It's a great long wait of 2018. And I suspect that we're into another of those long waits now that we all have dispensed with social distancing and masking and so on. I say all of that to say that it is now 25 minutes away from 10 o'clock. And unlike many other general elections that I've covered across this great Caribbean of ours, we still cannot tell you just yet what you have said when you voted today from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. However, the counting has begun in these constituencies. And I was going through that list, and in Christchurch South, that was one of the earliest locations where the count to begin. And over there at the Cuthbert Pilgrim Memorial Hall off Maxwell Road, the count began, as well as St. Michael North, where the counting began at Eden Lodge Primary School at least about an hour ago. So that's the state of play where the counting has begun, and we want to let you know that as soon as those earliest returns come in, it's straight into the computer and straight onto your screen, and you'll be able to know exactly where the balance of power will be by the end of the day, and who will be the first to gain or hold their seats. All 30 seats up for grabs, all 30 seats so far held by the incumbent, the Barbados Labour Party. And you'll see when those first returns come in, you'll see a chart with the candidates. So for example, here at the city of Bridgetown, where the Barbados Labour Party, do not adjust your screen. Yes, that is Michael Lashley, standing for Labour, the former Democratic Labour Party long-term candidate for MP for St. Philip North, and the cabinet minister in the Frondell Stewart administration, who's now standing for Labour in the city of Bridgetown. Neil Rowe is challenging him for the Democratic Labour Party, and for the coalition is Corey Beckles. And so when those figures start to come in, we get a very, very early indication, Corey Sandiford, as to how this night's going to turn out. You just need a few boxes. Walk me through the process. How early would you be able to get a sense of where this night is going based on the earliest possible returns?
Immediately. I mean, you start entering the numbers. Everything is set up here to go on the computer in terms of being given projections for both the seat and then also what it's saying to us nationally. I mean, there is the odd chance that when you enter the numbers, it could start looking, this box might be high, the other box might be low, you might get the other box half hour later, but still, it still gives us a sense that we can speak to immediately and get a sense of which way this election is headed for us.
Now, the city of Bridgetown usually comes in pretty early, if memory serves. City of Bridgetown doesn't take too long for the returns to come in. You're saying that you can tell, you can project from that onto a national picture?
Because it gives us an idea what the swing looks like, and once we have an idea what the swing looks like, then we also know, for example, the 4 marginal seats that we were talking about earlier, is it looking like they're going to go this way, or is it looking like they're going to stay where they already are, which is with the BLP?
But the intricacies of Michael Lashley, something that interests you. Here's the families of the Wiltshires and all those in Bayfield and so on heavily come out for St. Philip North, and for anybody that Michael Lashley says turn up. That was in the heady days of the Democratic Labour Party in Fortress St. Philip for the DLP. That's not the case anymore. What impact do you think his, shall we say, crossing the political floor, if metaphorically, will have in this election? Or will it just be a situation where the numbers will make really no difference in terms of his own candidacy?
I certainly think the numbers will make a difference in his old constituency. His moving, I think that will make a difference in terms of the numbers.
In St. Philip North?
Yes, in St. Philip North, yes, because how much of that support now goes to Clark, that replaces him, is the question. All right, how much of that support has followed him is the question. Do you understand? So I definitely, and then he benefits from the support of the Barbados Labour Party if that continues, also having moved to the city. So there is that. So definitely numbers will be interesting to watch.
If ever we get them. And City of Bridgetown, Neil Rowe versus Michael Lashley. You wouldn't have thought.
No.
Neil Rowe. Yeah. Dale Rowe.
Dale Rowe. Yeah.
Stand correct. Dale Rowe. And Corey Beckles.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't have imagined that 12 months ago.
Yeah.
If I said to you, that's going to be the lineup for City of Bridgetown, you wouldn't have said, you wouldn't have said that.
I mean, I would have.
Not even 2 months ago.
The plugged-in cynical supporters would say that.
People see things for what they are, not what they appear to be.
Okay. Well, explain that. Unpack that a bit for me. When you say that, what do you really mean?
I mean that because of my line of work, I can't make loose statements to the public, or even if I'm reporting to a client privately, I have to speak to facts.
To the data?
And yes, they have to speak to the data, have to. Like, I can't just make willy-nilly statements. We do have a tendency of Barbados to fly off with the latest rumor, and I guess it's newsworthy, and then sometimes you have news outlets, not this one, which take a story and then the story don't turn out to be true. Sometimes they recant the story and sometimes they don't, and just move on. And I mean, especially in this era that we're in now where everybody wants to break the news first. The point I'm making is that with politics, you always have appearances versus reality. And one has to be able to speak to the reality. Oftentimes, in my case, you can't do it publicly for various reasons, but you got to see things for what they are. And sometimes something does not appear as though it could be true. The Barbados Labour Party winning 30 seats twice. Who would have believed that prior to the 2022 election? Not many people. But it's exactly what happened. So you have to speak to fact. At the point, if I had poll data that I could have spoken to publicly, then that's what I would have said. A lot of people might not believe it. You would see the Democratic Labour Party, I'm sure, come out against it and say that, this poll for various reasons. I'm just giving a hypothetical here, but one has to speak to what the numbers are.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what those numbers mean for the city of Bridgetown specifically in a moment, but just to let you know, you'll see at the bottom right hand of your screen, 19 out of 30 with a little icon of a tick on a calculator. That means that the count has begun or is underway in 19 of the 30 constituencies at 18 minutes of 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. That is it. It has begun, is underway in 19 of the 30. So there's only another 11 that we don't know what's happening there yet. But that's the situation as it stands. Now, talk to me about the city of Bridgetown. And that this, I gather, is being updated as we speak. So we might have our 20th constituency being counted. But again, no returns have been completed just yet. For the city of Bridgetown, walk me through that. Appearance versus reality.
So what I can tell you from 2022 is Corey Lane, who was the BLP candidate at the time, in terms of percentage support in the constituency, achieved 77% of the vote. That's a huge number already. Even before I tell you what the other parties achieved, that's a huge number. You normally expect to see just over 50%, somewhere between 50 and 60, 77% of the vote. You had Kemar Stewart at the time. That's Kemar Stewart that ran the BLP. Thought he ran against Mia Molly, but maybe that was in 2018, ran in City of Bridgetown in 2022. So he got 17% on that occasion. So 17% is not a big number. So that gives us already, you see the kind of change that has to take place on the BLP side in terms of reduction in popularity versus the increase in popularity that the DLP needs to achieve in order to swing that seat their way. It's a lot of ground to cover. And just for the viewers' sake, again, the two parties don't start at zero. No. The BLP will be presumed to get back some of that support. They won't get back all. It's very likely that they will have lost some popularity. But will the DLP performance improve appreciably to the point where they're able to swing that seat? That's a massive number of votes.
Did Korea not outperform the Prime Minister in her constituency in St. Michael Northeast, if I'm not mistaken?
Can't say off the top of my head, but I mean, the Prime Minister's numbers were already so great to say that he outperformed her. I mean,
it's nothing. It's
and then again, and let's talk about voter turnout, because the Prime Minister's seat will be one where you have voters who don't turn out because nobody expects her to lose.
Right.
She has not lost that seat long before she was Prime Minister. Once she won that seat for the first time going to Parliament, she has not lost the seat. So maybe Corey Lane just moved greater numbers in terms of coming out to vote.
We've been talking about Mia Motley capturing the youth vote, but let's deal with the facts. Don Marshall, Mia Motley has been the hottest brand in Barbadian politics since, by my reckoning, 1992. I mean, even before the general election of 1994, she was a very hot prospect. I remember as a reporter covering the general election of that era of 94, and I get the sense that she's been, for a very long time, very hot with the youth vote in successive generations, it has to be said.
That's a rhetorical tally. She would have begun an upward peak, let me put it like that, around 2014 when she became leader of the opposition. I think leader of the opposition, yes. Definitively leader of the opposition, because she was temporarily that after 2008, but we all know what happens. When parties in the opposition, you get some convulsions going on. You hardly find incumbent parties going through these convulsions, because when you're in government, you can paper over the cracks. The tug of war between herself and Arthur was over. The 2013 election, that from the vantage point of the BLP, that nearly was won, was over, and it was time to move on from the general in Arthur. So she came into her own race as leading the opposition. Just after the general election in 2013, by 2014, I call it the beginning of her peak, because she has enjoyed a popularity from that moment through to now, I would say, where I would say only now there's been a slight dip, but that's realistic. We're just keeping it
Because people are used
realistic.
to
People get accustomed. There's the magic that you could spin. After a while, it's the norm of the human condition. After a while, people get accustomed. But that popularity continued. Her stardom relative to global appeal has also added to her charisma and the mesmerizing effect on Caribbean populations, not just Barbadian. Have served her in good stead. We come to a point where, however, all politics is local. And the question that will be asked increasingly of her, that's why I say we see a bit of a, not plateau, that would be dramatic, but we see a slight decline, and it's also quite normal, is when the question is asked, but what trophies have you brought home to the Barbados society and economy lately? When that question gets repeatedly asked, that's when the true measure of her legacy will begin to be understood. She navigated, she's a leader as a navigator. She's led in relation to crises that we've had to contend with, COVID and the post-lockdown recession, post-lockdown uncertainty, let me put it that now, global recession. And now we're in a phase where the Trump years will test this government. This is 2026, 2027, 2028. And the world order has in fact changed. The dynamics of international relations have in fact changed. While none of the parties really discussed this to any serious degree during the campaign, and perhaps that's why in my mind I said that, to me, I felt a sense of dumbing down. And I could concede the point that how you package and present your narrative also does matter. There was a disconnect across all the campaigns with the fact that the world has in fact changed. That Trump 2.0, the Trump quake, is something Barbados has to deal with immediately, beginning with third country asylum seekers, and do we house them? That's going to be after February 12th, and the motorcades and everything. That's what we have to deal with. How do we engage and relate to our neighbor 90 miles off the coast of Cuba? How do we relate? And in trade, international business, what kinds of solidarities are we going to build with other countries? What will be our relationship with the EU? And it can go on, but I'll yield at this point.
I'll be dating myself, but there's a song called There's Got to Be a Morning After. And that is very much going to be the question as we talk about those big ticket items of geopolitics and the impact. And I do want to spend some time on that, but just to let you know that the Frederick Smith Secondary School there at Trent has become the latest constituency to have its counting begin, St. James Central. So now we are at 21 of the 30, and over at St. James South at Queen's College, the vote has begun to be counted there for St. James South. No returns just yet, as we approach 10 minutes away from 10 o'clock. So there's the hurry up and wait thing going on here at Barbados today, because we really don't know what you have said, because the Electoral and Boundaries Commission is trying their best to count it, but it's taking their good time. Let's spend some time a little bit about these big ticket items, because after the bread and circus, after the music and the young brother and so on, we've got to deal with the fact that there is what we thought was the great democracy slowly disintegrating in the up north, and it is doing some extraordinary things that are beyond the pale of international law, and we're catching a lot of that. A country decides to invade a South American sovereign state, and flights to Barbados are canceled. So that has an instant impact on our tourism. We've already ended, it would appear, our relationship with Cuba in relation to, that had happened some time ago with the medical team, but that's not likely to be repeated because of a very active, evangelistic Secretary of State in the United States who's against any contact of any kind with Havana. And so that is changing the dynamic in the Caribbean and becoming to grips, really, are we not, with our own powerlessness or our own limited range of action on the international sphere for all the talk about being internationally visible and globally popular as our incumbent Prime Minister has been.
And I agree to a certain extent. I'll say this. I realized during the election, even though, because I followed on what Professor Marshall was saying, even though the Barbados Labour Party in particular, a couple of candidates tried to bring up the global dynamics, you know, the new global dynamics that we have to navigate from the perspective of, yes, we need somebody who can navigate that, somebody who's proven that they can navigate that. One of the things that I did notice is that they stayed away from the particulars. Things like, what are we going to do with the people who are deported? The reality is you have to take them. What are we going to do? Our powerlessness becomes real. All right? And that's something that we have to confront. All right? So I'm not saying that that's what the Prime Minister is going to do. I'm saying that is the reality. What is little Barbados going to do if they say they're going to send back all the people out? And we've seen it happen in other Caribbean nations. We've seen the results of that. All right, and that will become so. But is that going to be something that I'm going to stand on a political platform and say, is that politically expedient?
No, but that's not how I was framing it. However, and I take your point that these are complex issues.
Yeah.
Not a lot of wiggle room.
The powerlessness, though. Let's tackle that. So if I had to bring this on the platform, if I was leading a political party in this moment, because it all comes down to narratives, right? How compelling your narrative could be, what rhetorics would you bring to bear, how would you motivate a population to think?
Optics.
Yeah, and optics and so on. And as we talk about strong leadership. Now, certainly one of the things that we need to do, and
Now, when you say how you will present that to the people,
yeah,
that you're not going to take the legacy of the big bad America send them back.
the first thing is that it's a pity that CARICOM could not sit among itself and settle the question of how it would treat as a unified bloc
Well, I agree
the
with
question
you there, and
of
discuss
the
it
third
on
country asylum seekers. Let's just settle it as a region. What kind of posture, what would we do? And strong leadership throughout the Caribbean requires building these solidarity communities around key areas, key points, key issues.
Assuming that the leverage is not greater than that solidarity.
Look, I'm going to say this. The leverage, what's happening is that we have, at the same time as our leader, our Prime Minister, our current Prime Minister, has been made a mark on climate and made a mark on building regional solidarity and so on and so forth. We've seen some cracks. Because the United States has withdrawn from as many as 66 different international organizations, climate is no longer going to be the soapbox upon which we can begin to make an impression unless we build other kinds of solidarity communities. One. So the messaging around that and accessing finance to support climate mitigation and so on is going to be a Herculean task to overcome, because the IMF resilience and climate related fund that we relied on when we were last with the IMF has been shut down, to the extent that we will engage them again, because I expect that the government will engage them again. there's not that the search for climate finance to support climate mitigation. That's going to be something the world has changed.
And the debt swaps.
That's right. The world has changed, and that I'll come to that in a minute. The second thing is that a number of faux pas has been made by the Prime Minister on the platform during this campaign. But let me be balanced. The flubs, foul-ups, bleeps, and blunders of the opposition Democratic Labour Party have been legendary.
Egregious.
Legendary. They're the stuff that will last for a long time to come. But I'm moving now towards some of the more serious, unnecessary faux pas that have been made.
Unforced errors, I think.
Unforced errors on the part of the Prime Minister. In speaking to sister and fraternity parties, she's relying on a set of relations between the Barbados Labour Party and let's state the Jamaica's People's National Party that are more the creature of recent times than Tom Adams' Barbados Labour Party and Edward Seaga's Jamaica Labour Party at a time during the revolution in Cuba. The alliances between Seaga and Tom Adams at the time when...
You're talking about Grenada?
Yes. I'm saying on the platform she speaks about a natural affinity between the Barbados Labour Party and the PNP. And historically that's not accurate.
That's not true.
There's been before her, there was an alliance between Tom Adams' BLP, Edward Seaga's GLP, and Eugenia Charles' Dominica Freedom Party in relation to their cooperation on the question of Grenada. So at the time of the implosion of the revolution, they could invite the United States to participate. So that is a matter of historical record. Now, that the current Prime Minister might ideologically, at this moment, have affinities with the PNP, and that's fine. But you can't say that. You ought not to say that on the political platform because the GLP has just been returned by the electorate. You don't want to disrespect the electorate. The electorate in Jamaica returned the Jamaica Labour Party only recently, in late 2025. So if you need to build regional solidarities and continue, we expect that the Prime Minister will continue on. If you want to build those solidarities, you don't necessarily need to say something on your platform about the affinities of your political party in relation to another. The mistakes have been made again with Trinidad, where we seem to be in a collision course. Mia Motley's ruling Barbados Labour Party is on a collision course with Trinidad's equivalent ruling party. And it might
United National Congress.
Right, and the offense might not have started from here, by the way. No. It might have started from the other end.
Okay, let me just, that's a lot to unpack there. We're just coming up on 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 11th of February, where the counting has begun in all but 7 constituencies of the 30 in this general election. I'm joined here at Barbados Today headquarters by Ayo Ololara. She is a political scientist and entrepreneur who's dedicated herself to the study of global affairs and civic engagement. She is the host of the Just Politics, Our Worldview podcast. To my right, our resident psephologist, the man who actually looks at the data and says, this is the trend for tonight, going how long or short it will be, is Corey Sandiford of Caribbean Development Research Services, CADRES. You just heard from Professor Dawn Marshall, who is the director of the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute for Social Economic Studies, SELISES, University of the West Indies. And joining us from the University of Oxford, the Rhodes Scholar and thinker Raheem Augustine Joseph, who has been listening quite patiently to all this. I'm going to ask him to weigh in as we get ready for the early returns to come in from any one of those 23 constituencies. Anyone will do.
Anyone will
according to Corey, I only just need one. I'll be able to tell you how this night's going to go. Raheem, weigh in on this, and you've been taking time from at Oxford to look at the international picture. about the issue of powerlessness, about the need now more than ever for regional solidarity and the cracks, the fissures in that system of solidarity known as CARICOM. Your thoughts?
I think I agree with Professor Marshall, and even I, to the extent to which it was not mentioned entirely as part of the campaign, save and except for moments when the BLP mentioned that, hey, and particularly the Minister of Foreign.
To just stick a pin there, we are joined by someone who is going to talk about how the night is going. Manny Joseph is with Paris of the Barbados Labour Party at Labour Party headquarters on Robert Street. All right, we'll come back to Manny there, just a little snafu. But we wanted to hear, get a sense of what the mood was there at Robert Street. Let's go back. I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
That's fine. So
you were making the point about the issue of solidarity or the lack thereof.
So save and except, obviously, for when Minister Simmons on the platform speaks about the actions of the United States and what the local response should be. So that's one. The second thing is that the DLP platform also stayed very clear from it, which was interesting because opposition parties have a tendency to be able to maximize every single political opportunity. And I say that I was disappointed to the extent that the leader of the opposition, when asked about the Venezuela question, essentially didn't have a position. But again, there is a discordance now that we have to wrestle with, which is an interesting one. There is the international posture, a decolonial question, which has been advocated by Prime Minister Motley from 2018 onwards. And then there is the pragmatic domestic politics that is a consequence of the powerlessness, but also the inability of the region and other blocs to be able to come together to respond to some of the questions or actions by the United States of America. Of course, we've heard Canada speaking about it to the extent that Prime Minister Carney has been affected by that sort of fissure. But I get a sense as well within the region, obviously, of these fissures. And I disagree with Professor Marshall to the extent of the parties being the basis of these fissures. To the also noting that the actions, of course, or this engagement by Prime Minister Bissessar, or this bedfellow relationship with the United States of America, at the expense of Caribbean solidarity, has kind of created this catapulting of the exposing of the regional integration movement. And nobody's saying, or at least I'm certainly not saying, and I don't have any partisan colors, so I'm at liberty to say that, what you do and how you do what you do in politics matters. That to the extent that the United States of America, as part of the region, can engage prime ministers and ensure whether it be the boats, whether it be the support for the invasion or the kidnapping, whatever lexicon you want to utilize, of Venezuela, and how Trinidad and Tobago has essentially supported such action in discordance with the regional position of the Barbadian lexicon of friends of all and satellites of none, is concerning to me. And how Trinidad and Tobago, particularly Prime Minister, has made a fool of the regional integration solidarity movement by arguing that CARICOM is an unreliable partner. Let's put in bracket here how CARICOM has essentially held second to the United States the trade surplus balances of Trinidad and Tobago, has further exposed the region. Now, I'm not laying blame fully at the hands of one Prime Minister, but the region also, the integration movement, has not responded in a solidarity way that brings heads together to be able to deal with how exactly do we deal with these issues, whether it be the issues of the drugs trafficking or whatever that we want to call it, whether it be how we respond to some of the pressures of the food, the deportees. Well, I was seeing the interview on the TV here. It's being shown, or I could continue.
Oh, okay. We're back here at the Barbados Labour Party headquarters on Robert Street, And with us, we have the CEO and campaign coordinator of the DLP, Pat Parrish, with us. Pat, can you tell us how the day went for the Barbados Labour Party?
Today, we had some persons who were not on the list that called, and we were able to get some of them on the list and direct them to the various polling stations. Other than that, I would say that we had a very good day. The weather was kind to us, which is very important. As it relates to the voter turnout, we know that there was a low voter turnout, but I would not go into details with that. That is for the General Secretary. I only do the coordination. So we had a good day.
Yes. What is the sense you're feeling in terms of possible outcome from being on the ground?
But I was not on the ground today.
Okay.
I was coordinated from the office. And I always say you have to wait until that last ballot is counted.
So you're all ready for tonight, the final results. You're anticipating. What are you anticipating?
I said to you before, and I'll say it again, we are waiting until that final ballot is counted across Barbados. So we are just having an election watch at the moment. As you can see, there are persons who gather to watch the election and hear the results. It is something that we always do.
Have you been hearing any counting, any results of that?
No, not as yet. I know they have started counting in several constituencies, St. Joseph, St. Philip West, St. Philip North. There are quite a few that they have started.
The latest result was 21.
21, yeah. So we should get an early result.
Hopefully.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, too.
You're welcome.
What you say?
Well, I mean, that I'm stating the facts. But the very first returns of snow come in. We can now finally tell you 10:08, St. Michael West. Keep that on the screen for a while. That's a picture for the polling districts for St. Michael West, with the very first figures coming in. Chris Gibbs, who landed the job as housing minister for the Labour Party, and is off to a canter against Damien Fannis of the Democratic Labour Party, a long-time candidate in many elections. Patsy Nurse now turning out for the PCP, who formerly turned out for the Democratic Labour Party in St. Thomas, not getting any traction with the voters. But that's the early picture. Also in St. Michael Northeast, off to a canter as well, as expected. Mia Motley, Barbados Labour Party, and Jamal Sandiford of the Democratic Labour Party with merely 27 votes, with 7 votes for Clarine Howard, the independent there for St. Michael Northeast. In St. Michael Southeast, a whopping return for Santia Bradshaw, well underway with 1,049 votes against 206 by the General Secretary of the Democratic Labour Party, Pedro Shepherd. That's the situation in St. Michael Southeast. Let's just quickly, slowly walk those through, because those figures are very important. They're the very earliest returns that we can bring you, and we need to go back over them again so you are very clearly aware of where we are. That's the picture. Note it, and I'm going to ask Corey Sandiford to give me some idea of how that is looking for these constituencies.
Can I get some boxes? Very useful to you if I get boxes.
Okay, so boxes would be of help, because some boxes would be out and front for one party, and another box would be giving you the entirely different story.
Well, everything here is set up to tell a story by box by box.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the situation there, though. Very much off and running the Labour Party candidate for St. Michael Southeast. Don Marshall.
This is trending at 2018. So it's not looking good for the Democratic Labour Party for sure. but you will have to say congratulations again on the Barbados Labour Party's capacity to sustain levels of support that are in keeping with the very popular embrace of its leader, and in keeping with the performance that could be expected by the Labour Party when they decide to engage in this ritual. They always bring their A game. And yes, it's a question of resources, but it's not enough to just simply say resources. I think many people say, oh, they have the money. I think you miss that you try to recruit the best that you can secure. So if someone is skilled in social media use, you recruit the best. If you have influencers that are going to play a part in shaping impressions, you recruit the best. So they've been always able to get value for money. We had an example earlier about someone saying about, say, Ralph Thorne's Instagram page, still carrying images of him wearing red shirts. If you want to, if you want value for money, whoever you're paying to do this has to be able to say to the leader, listen, you're the face of this party. Everything that around you has to look and appear a particular way. It's clear that the Prime Minister still allows herself to be handled by professionals and not just presume that, okay, by my rhetorical talent and my popularity, I can wing it. No, she still allows herself to be handled. So her media page, and everything looks the part, feels the part. And I'll just end by simply saying these numbers are, in Bajan parlance, off the charts. Off the charts. I've been here before, and I'm getting shares at 2018.
All right, so the projection is that the Barbados Labour Party will be returned the prediction is the Barbados Labour Party will be returned to office. It will be a Labour hold all around, but the margin of the votes so far, you just saw St. Michael Northeast there with the Prime Minister comfortably ahead in that seat, suggests, just on the face of it, shades of 2018, really a repeat of 2022 as well, if these numbers are anything to go by. Again, you would like to see the boxes, but still, it's starting to look a very, very same old for how the voters responded in this election.
Well, right. So I'm sure that you have the candidates, the Democratic Labour Party candidates, wherever they are present, and they will be getting that tap on the arm that Professor Marshall was referring to earlier at this point in time, and they would definitely hope that they see the returns, that they will at least be a little bit closer, that there would appear to be any running, as opposed to what you just saw represented there on the graphic. They're not in the game. They're not in the game. So if things proceed on this basis and pointing out that, well, we just saw 3, just now 4, and one of them was the Prime Minister, so you've kind of put that one to the side. Yes, that was never going to be any other way. But anyhow, the others that were shown there on the graphic, they would want those bars to look at a little closer, as opposed to this. They're just not in the game. So I wanted to just mention, for the sake of the public, St. Michael Northwest, because I think it was you, Professor, that was talking about St. Michael Northwest. That's one of the seats where you have interests, and I'm using this seat now on what happened in 2022 to just paint a picture to the public for what I was saying earlier about how swing works. So in 2022, Ryan Walters, as the candidate there for the first time, actually lost. He had 2% swing away from the Democratic Labour Party, whereas the BLP had 2% swing towards them. And one would have thought that maybe they would have performed better, but what they will go on to describe to you and the viewers is that there was such great swing against Chris Sinkler, who was the candidate who ran there previously in 2018, that he came 26% away from Chris Sinkler. And this is somebody who, if you go back to 2013, he was one of the people who was actually able to increase his support. I think he was +8, whereas the party was minus whatever it was at the time. He was +8. He was able to grow his support. So 26% away from him in 2018. So when you bring that number all the way down to 2, even though Ryan Walters did not win the constituency, that number still has meaning. And this is what I mean when I'm trying to put out there that the numbers don't start from 0. And there's a question of how much did the parties get back? How much, and this is to what Professor is speaking to about you have to commend the Barbados Labour Party still mobilizing that support in the context where you're saying that there doesn't seem to be a choice, one party state, all these things that people say popularly, they still have to go and win the election, they still have to mobilize voters, they still have to get back the majority of those people who voted for them in the past. They're not going to get back all, that's not going to be likely, or they're not going to get back more, that's not going to be likely either. However, they still have to go and win the election, and that appears to be what's happening from what we see in the graphics just now.
Going to ask Olalara to weigh in a moment, but let's just get quickly back to those early returns, 5 minutes into the first returns for the night. You just saw St. Michael Northeast, the Prime Minister, but now St. Michael West. This is the first indication of a return for St. Michael West, with Chris Gibbs of the Labour Party polling 116 votes thus far, and Damien Fannis 31 of the Democratic Labour Party. Next, we go to another of our constituencies that we've got returns on thus far, and these are going to be updated live to the screen. So when that number is updated, as it comes in, it'll be automatically updated and shown to you. You saw in St. Michael Southeast, Santia Bradshaw pulling way ahead of Pedro Chabot of the Democratic Labour Party of 1,049 votes against 206 votes for Pedro Chabot. Not looking good if you really want to be competitive in a seat, despite the extremely long coattails of the Prime Minister that has affected all of her candidates thus far in the last two elections. It's not only maybe the strength or weakness, relative strength or weakness, it's the extraordinary vote of confidence in Nyamwali that has pulled a lot of them in. But last time I checked, politicians, leading politicians, don't really like large majorities. What do you think about that, Don Marshall? Large majorities being almost, the kiss of death for politicians. I know Owen Arthur felt that way about large majorities.
And before him, Earl Barrow. Great, excellent. Earl Barrow. Which makes Prime Minister Motley a unique individual. I don't think, I think it's a matter of choice. In terms of large majorities, there's always this worry about a revolt in the backbench. And because you have to control a backbench, you have your cabinet or your frontbench ministers, and then you could always get resistance from the backbench and possible renegade behavior. We don't have a tradition of the whip because our numbers are not very, very large. In large legislatures, you need the whip because in England, for example, it's 375 to win the government, I think. Yeah. So you'll need the whip to bring something like that. So, and it's a figurative whip, by the way. If one is listening up there, is not an actual whip.
We don't have really party whips in our version of Westminster.
Small numbers, so you can pick up the phone and persuade a guy to do what he has to do. However, I do believe, from observing the style of the current Prime Minister, that she does not have those kinds of fears about large majorities and the possibility of revolts. Well, she's not shy of appointing large cabinets, one. We can debate whether or not that's useful, that's good for the country, but she's not shy of doing it. And two, there are roles that backbenchers can play and have played as parliamentary secretaries and so on, that she's found useful as well. Which, of course, I cannot leave out Thorne. I cannot leave out discussing Thorne because Thorne was one that revolted. Mm-hmm. But he's a successful attorney with a successful law practice and could be comfortable without a ministry, let me put it like that. There are a number of a politician. The culture is that a number of our politics tends to be largely transactional. So you find MPs like if they're in the front bench because they figure being in the cabinet, you can influence policy decisions a little bit more directly. That might benefit your constituency, for example. Whereas in the backbench, unless there's a call of the parliamentary group, you may not may have access to influencing policy as you do as a cabinet minister, meeting weekly with your leader. So in that sense, I could understand, I think in that sense we can understand why it is fair to say I don't think Prime Minister Motley fears large majorities.
Okay. One of the things that we can tell you now is Christchurch West has started to come in, where William Duguid, the senior minister responsible for infrastructure in the last Labour Party administration, pulling well ahead of Andrew Cave, the challenger, 198 votes for Cave of the Democratic Labour Party, to William Duguid, 744 for Labour. Your thoughts on that? Does it say much to you?
Same thing. The continuation, the same no boxes. We corresponded with my colleague, and he has the same issue on his end. So it makes it a little bit difficult to speak to the swing or intricacies that we will want to speak to. But we see how the race is trending. And it is looking like not great for the Democratic Labour Party, or should I point out the newer parties as well? And we get that question mark of whether in some of those seats, where if a few of those votes, but it honestly would not have made any difference if the newer parties that went to the Democratic Labour Party is not nearly enough.
Have you also said that if it continues like this, we're going to see a swing away from the Democratic Labour Party, further away, which is crazy.
Going into the election, because okay, so I talked earlier before we came on this program about push and pull effect. Will people be pushing if the Democratic Labour Party wins seats tonight? Will people be pushing them into these seats, or are they looking to be pulled? Because the entire conversation that I've seen them have on the campaign via social media and so on is framed around the Barbados Labour Party and what it is not doing or what it is doing wrong. And you really do have to give account of yourself to the voters. So are you just criticizing and you're hoping that people are pulling you in via sympathy or because they want opposition? And then you have newer parties which are defining them as saying they're keeping the BLP in check. So the whole conversation is about the BLP. You kind of like push the BLP in voters' eyes continually by making the conversation about them constantly.
But again, it sounds as if you're saying this is a referendum on the leadership of the Democratic Labour Party.
All of them are, because at the end of the day, I keep saying, we see 30-0, 30-love, to use back Professor's term that I used earlier, 230 loves. And we say, oh, the BLP has achieved this massive thing, but it's really a conversation about the Democratic Labour Party and that they're not showing. So then on this occasion, we know that the BLP is probably not going to be able to achieve the same popularity that they have in the past. They couldn't achieve the same popularity in 2022 that they did in 2018. So they would lose something incrementally. But will the Democratic Labour Party increase its support and in enough numbers to win seats?
I'm going to ask Ira and Don to weigh in a moment. Let me just run the table once again so that you know exactly what the state of play is in the early returns in this general election, this 11th night of February. We've seen returns come in a number of constituencies. They're being updated as we speak, but we want to bring you all the results as they have come in thus far in all of the constituencies so far. And we've got, by my count, at least 4 constituencies that have turned up already with the count. Let's have a look at those constituencies, and you can keep abreast of the developments while we discuss among ourselves the state of play and what this will likely mean, with time now at 24 minutes past 10. So can we have a look at the returns for these seats thus far and the candidates, so that you know all of what we know so far this evening. Some of you might have been just joining us and not seen everything. In St. Michael Northeast, Mia Motley is so far at 717 votes, compared to Jamal Sandiford of the Democratic Labour Party. That's St. Michael Northeast are coming in, and 22 for the independent there. That was St. Michael Northeast. In St. Michael North, this is the newest that we've had so far this evening, where Davidson Ishmael in St. Michael Northeast is pulling ahead of Dawn Marie Armstrong of St. Michael North for the Democratic Labour Party. And the Friends of Democracy, represented by Bertnell Ricardo Harrison, has pulled 13 votes thus far. So have a look at that for a moment. That's St. Michael North. Davidson Ishmael, that's the newest figure we've got thus far, 184 votes, ahead of Dawn Marie Armstrong of the Democratic Labour Party with 59 votes, and 13 votes for the Friend of Democracy's Bertnell Ricardo Harrison. Now to St. Michael Southeast, where it's been off and running for the Labour Party incumbent, Santia Bradshaw, at 1,049 votes compared to Pedro Shepherd's 206. That's the situation in St. Michael Southeast, covering such areas as Pinelands. And in St. Michael West, the picture is Chris Gibbs for the Labour Party, pulling ahead in that constituency. Just quickly running through that. St. Michael West, Chris Gibbs, Damian Fannis of the Democratic Labour Party with 31 votes. So that's the state of play by my count. 4 constituencies I saw just now: St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael North, St. Michael Southeast, and St. Michael West. St. Michael constituencies tend to be among the earliest, along with the city of Bridgetown. Kind of wondering what's happening in the city of Bridgetown. We'll find out what's happening there with that count. That usually comes in pretty early. St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael North, St. Michael Southeast, St. Michael West, and now St. Andrew for the first time tonight. Ronald Springer of the Labour Party is polling ahead of the Democratic Labour Party's Ramon Goodman, 109 votes to 48 votes for St. Andrew, with Ronald Springer again in a positive position for Labour. That's the picture in St. Andrew. So 5 constituencies I've got by my count. Let's see if we got them all. St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael North, St. Michael Southeast, St. Michael West, and St. Andrew. And all of them are trending Labour's way this evening, and comfortably so by all accounts. Doesn't look to be at this early stage yet, it has to be said. I can always tell you about, if you've got the time, about a little parish called St. Joseph, where it always looks as if Randall Rouse will run home with it all in St. Joseph. And that last box, I think it's OC1, comes in, and that turns the table and ends Randall Rouse's long quest to win in St. Joseph for the Democratic Labour Party. It has to get some sort of medal, if not the Barbados Bravery Medal. And we have those characters in Barbadian politics. The D.D. Garners going way back, long before many of us at this table were around. There's long-standing candidates over in St. John, someone who was bound and determined that Earl Bauer would not win and stood for candidacy for many years. So we have these long-suffering candidates. But it has to be said, whether it's new blood or old blood, the Labour Party, it's going to be their night again. And all eyes are on what will be left for the main challenger, the Democratic Labour Party, to gain this evening. Ayo Olalara.
What would be left for them to gain?
At all.
Well,
again, give me the numbers.
If these numbers continue like this, as I was saying earlier, we're going to see a further swing away from the Democratic Labour Party. And right now we're seeing, we have a number of swings way above the teens, right? Which is crazy, which is high already. So how much further are we going to go now? All right, so that's the question. I mean, at this point in time, look, I don't want to be unkind to anybody, right? But let me stop there.
No, I mean, we've got to call it as we see it. So if you think that there's something that is being said about the Democratic Labour Party today.
Let me put it this way.
Let's say
I want to see a return. Contrary to many people who watch my show, I literally want to see a return of a Democratic Labour Party in Barbados. We've not found the right person to lead that party as yet. We've not found that person. And I think the Democratic Labour Party felt like because Ralph had a seat in Parliament, that made him the person to come over, and that would give them some push. Couldn't be further from the truth. The personality of the person matters, and it matters greatly. And
so John Marshall, the quest for a charismatic leader has to begin in an election party?
Well,
in a political party?
I agree with some of what is said, but let me make this point. The crisis facing the Democratic Labour Party comes down to root and branch, and not just a leader. Certainly from a messianic figure is not going to help the Democratic Labour Party, because we do this all the time, and we end up blaming, well, the first one you could blame not just Francis Stewart, but the entire cabinet, the entire thing. But let's move on from him. We blamed Verda the last time, and we thought we found a leader in Ronnie Yearwood. The minute you blame Thorne alone, you're deluding yourself. The Pisa, Yearwood, Thorne belong to the same bracket. The Democratic Labour Party, as a brand, needs to refresh its politics. You need a movement.
It doesn't have a brand.
Its brand is shot. There's this stubborn tendency, because I have made several appeals for the Democratic Labour Party to present.
Let me just interrupt you there. There's a very, very different picture.
Yeah, this
in
is,
St. Lucie, though, so
we
finally have a horse race, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, but we're talking about 1 or 2 polling divisions.
1 or 2 polling divisions, but still, for the very first evening, this Democratic Labour Party has shown up for the fact, where a vote. This is what makes life interesting for journalists. We want to see the more marginal seats, but this is more marginal bosses. But this is interesting. That said, this is an interesting development, where Peter Phillips of the Barbados Labour Party is ahead by 1 vote, and now also St. John has come in, where Ralph Thorne is behind by Charles Griffith by about 82 votes in St. John. So those are more interesting developments from the ones to watch, as we named earlier, St. Lucie and St. John being the ones to watch, along with St. Philip West as well. But that's the picture. Once again, in St. Lucie, Peter Phillips of the Labour Party is 1 vote ahead so far. It is early days yet, but still a much more competitive showing by the Undertaker Ian Griffith, who is seeking to bury his opponent, but he is still, if you forgive the black humor of a journalist, that's the situation there in St. Lucie. Okay, and politically, of course, not in actual fact. Now it's looking a little more competitive for Labour in St. Lucie. That's the situation. So things can change in a heartbeat. 336 votes against Ian Griffith's 286. So that's an update in St. Lucie. 336 votes for Peter Phillips, 286 votes for Ian Griffith after a 1-vote margin change. Back to St. John we go, 183 votes for Charles Griffith, and Ralph Thorne polling 101 votes thus far. It is very early days yet, but again, a very interesting picture is turned up in those 2 ones to watch, St. Lucie and St. John. Over in St. Andrew, the picture is one where Ronald Springer of the Labour Party is holding on to a comfortable lead so far against Ramon Goodman of the Democratic Labour Party. That's the situation there in St. Andrew. So St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael North, St. Michael Southeast, St. Michael West, St. Andrew, St. Lucie, and St. John. And let's run the table once again. St. Michael North, that's the picture so far. No new votes since we last were in St. Michael North, where Dawn Marie Armstrong at 247 votes is challenging Davison Ishmael comfortably ahead for the Labour Party in St. Michael North. Over in St. Michael North East, we saw earlier Prime Minister Motley ahead in the 700s against meager returns for the Democratic Labour Party there. That's the situation there in St. Michael North. We're going to refresh the screen with new votes. There we are. No new votes there where Mia Motley is well ahead of Jamal Sander for the Democratic Labour Party, with a smattering of votes there for the PCP. First votes being cast, actually, for the PCP thus far this night. So there we are. We seem to have a little more competitive showing in St. John and St. Lucie, but again, you need to see a little bit more.
Well, I mean, the St. Lucie seat is actually a good example because at first, let's say 5-10 minutes ago, when we saw the numbers come, we saw 99 to 98, one vote ahead for the Barbados Labour Party. But if we were keying that into the system, that would show you what that box looked like versus the last election. So that would immediately give you an idea of what the increase in turnout was versus what it isn't, and you'd be able to get spoil votes put in, and you'd be able to see how that box is performing versus how the BLP and the DLP performed last time. So it might have appeared completely different, I'm saying, and then when you see now the 336, I think it was, to 280 something, somewhere in there.
50 vote lead.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, just when the numbers include, then that shows us something more on the screen, but we'll be able to speak to the number with more intricacy.
Okay, that's the situation now updated in St. John, where Charles Griffith is now at just 5 votes short of 500, and the deficit against Ralph Thorne is still there at 350 votes for Ralph Thorne, 495 for Charles Griffith. That's the situation in St. John. So far, Labour ahead by just over 150 votes. Now, that's the picture in St. John, and it has that. For all this talk about Prime Minister coattails being long and all that, Barbados is still, politics being local, polling districts still matter. Boxes, families within boxes who vote in a certain way, that still is the case. It's not a monolithic or one-size-fits-all view of any constituency in Barbados.
I mean, I don't get too into the families and all that. I deal with numbers. At the end of the day, that St. John seat, one of them would expect Ralph Thorne to be doing better than he's currently doing. I'm not saying the race is over, however, one would expect him. The election raises leaders' profiles. This is the first election that he's facing, as Professor Marshall was saying earlier, but one would expect that if he's going to carry that seat, he'll be performing more strongly than you would expect it to be looking more like how St. Lucie had been looking initially when the numbers start coming in. So I would think that is disappointing for him so far, and his support base and his party who think that he's going to win and who thinks that the party is going to win and so on. I honestly never thought that was going to be the case. I never thought I was going to see that happening. I wanted to wait. Let's just dip my toes.
Are you getting the box information?
No, I'm not. But I just wanted to dip my toes into that conversation about the Democratic Party and what you were saying.
I would yield.
Right. What you were saying, Io, versus what Professor was saying. The Democratic Labour Party, to me, from my one analyst standpoint, is just, for whatever reason, refusing to join the 21st century. I don't know why. I keep wanting to see. I keep wanting to see. Yes, I keep wanting to see them perform at a higher level. I don't want to see them do the same thing. I don't want to see them perform at the same level as the BLP.
Let me get a sense of what 21st century is: the Corey Sandiford version, then the Don Marshall version, and of course up north after Iowa weighs in, Raheem, Augustine, Joseph.
All I'm saying is, I'm not countering either Io or Professor, but I'm saying that for the Barbados Labour Party has very obviously found a way to speak to the electorate, and I was talking earlier about the youth vote, and the young people who do vote, they capture most of those votes, the majority of them. So they found a way to speak to young people and to the electorate in a way that is working. On the other hand, we're saying that we have this low electoral turnout, or not as many people turn out to vote who could be. So there are votes out there that are up for grabs, but for whatever reason, the Democratic Labour Party is not able to find a way to appeal to those people who don't feel attracted enough to the BLP to vote for it. They're not able to convert that into support. They're not able to grow their support. And that's something you will hear this talk about, oh, the Bs win elections when the Democratic Labour Party supporters don't turn out. I've been hearing that forever and a day. But what's been happening since 2018? Has the DLP's support been increasing? I was saying earlier that when you look at the DLP supporter, the support base is aging. So you have a population that yes, you have this huge traditionally large support base, but the population is getting older, and you're not converting newer voters who are joining the voters list every election cycle. You're not converting that into new support. So you have the Barbados Labour Party that's growing its support and it's having support amongst younger demographics versus the Democratic Labour Party that's getting an older type of support and is not growing amongst the young populations. Theoretically, there are young people out there whose votes they could be getting, but they're not finding ways, they're not joining the 21st century to find ways to appeal to those young people.
Okay.
And with that, I would hand over to the professor who wanted to talk about what that would look like.
Before you get the Don Marshall view of what the Democratic Party should look like in the 21st century, I should tell you that in this, the 6th year of that said century, in Christchurch, West Central, Adrian Medic Ford is polling 300 votes against Rashid Belgrave's 110 votes. So that's the very first Christchurch constituency to come in, from what I gather. The very first returns for Christchurch West Central, where it's Adrian Ford leading the tally for the Labour Party in Christchurch West Central. So, Don Marshall, your view of what the Democratic Party should look like in the 21st century?
Well, it has to think about its message and ensuring that that message connects. And in terms of, we all spoke about the need to reach people wherever they are, using the different platforms and communicating in a way in which did I see something there? Something come up on the screen?
I just want to tell you that. So Michael South, your vision or lack thereof for on behalf of the Democratic Party is showing up big time for Kirk Humphrey, for Kirk Humphrey's benefit, in that he's well ahead of Nathaniel Boyce of the Democratic Party in St. Michael South. Can some of this also be the newness, the relative newness of these candidates for the Democratic Labour Party?
Could be, but that would be to minimize the depth of the rejection. I was once told, and not once, I was frequently told, that the Democratic Labour Party refuses to present alternatives because there's a moment in time in the electoral cycle when you will present your proposals or your alternatives. That is dingy old style politics that belonged to an era some 40 years ago.
Along with Lady Bird books.
That's right. The truth of the matter is, if there are crises facing Barbados right now of a local geopolitical and international sense, you want to present yourself as an alternative, you weigh in on the issues. Mm-hmm. You weigh in on the issues, you offer alternatives, you offer suggestions. Where there are moments you have to agree with the government, you agree with the government. But where you say a DLP approach would be, you say what it ought to be. Mm-hmm. You don't play this weasel politics game where you say, my job is only to oppose, and that I'm not helping you with the solutions. That is what you call 20th century style thing. That's not, we live in an age where Barbadians can use the social media and listen to governments across the region and the world discuss current issues. They can listen to think tank institutions, they can listen to oppositional groups, where this is a normal part of the discourse. You come up with solutions that face the country because you want to show the citizenry that you're plugged in. Mm-hmm. You don't hide back and criticize. And I think that has been the mode of the Barrows DLP that stuck with them, where you are cagey about these things. So that's just one example of what I mean when I say that the party needs to reorganize itself to be one where it is thinking seriously about the policy formulation process, thinking critically about the issues. I'll give you one example. They came up with this crime trying to find the language now, it's getting late in the day. But they came up with a dossier speaking to crime solutions, which was the one moment that should signal to them this is what we ought to be doing. Because the Prime Minister, in her wisdom, saw usefulness in the document. And I'm saying that should be for the economy, that should be for public services, that should be for, don't just react to government, come up with solutions and change the conversation in Barbados.
All right.
Okay, before I bring in
Sorry.
Olalara, let me just let you know that these are real-time figures coming in. And right now, the Labour Party is comfortably leading in 10 constituencies. The GS saw that update before your very eyes. 689 votes as Colin Jordan pulls ahead of Jason Phillips of the Democratic Labour Party. So in 10 constituencies thus far, it's Labour's night. And that's the trend we've seen with a little flutter early in the evening in St. Lucie, but then in real time, we saw that change as the boxes came in for St. Lucie. We are looking at St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael North, St. Michael Southeast, St. Michael West, St. Andrew, St. Michael South, the parishes, the rural parishes of St. Lucie and St. John, Christchurch, West Central, and St. Peter. In all 10 of those constituencies so far, Labour is ahead. Ayo, your thoughts on the fate of the DLP in the 21st century?
Yes, because I was listening to both the professor and Corey, and the one question that came to my mind is the question I've asked before: what is the idea of the modern Democratic Labour Party government, or rather party, Democratic Labour Party? What's the idea of them? And they've not been able to sell us a story, an idea, or anything. And that's the problem that I'm having. Now, you say that, no, they don't need what do you call them? What type of leader?
The search for a messianic leader.
A messianic leader, right? A charismatic leader. But that's not what we're saying. What I'm saying is this.
That's what you said. I said.
I understand,
you were
because that's
talking about-
usually the kind of conversation that
we
surrounds
always
that,
said-
right?
No,
But
there
this
was
is
a
what,
narrative.
let me finish.
I know there was a narrative about whether or not we should blame the leader.
I understand that,
And I
but
said
then
it
I'm
goes beyond
saying,
the leader. It's the institution.
let me tell you where it comes
Let's
to the
hear it.
leader.
Yeah.
Where it comes to the leader is this. You need a leader to organize the whole entity.
But this is not.
I don't think you guys are disagreeing, because I've heard him saying the same thing that Don Marshall saying needs to be root and branch reform.
Yes.
And to deal with the mechanics of an
And it has to come in with
party.
the whole story, the whole idea of the party and everything. But continue, sorry, go ahead.
No, we wanted to get your view of what
Oh, I thought you
the
were going
Democratic
back
Labour
there,
Party is,
sorry.
because the returns are in so far for 10 constituencies. And in all 10, the picture is pretty much the same, where the Labour Party is well ahead of the Democratic Labour Party challenger. But spare a thought for the other parties. Those other parties there with the colors of green and orange aren't there for show. They mean to say that there's time perhaps to end the sentimental affection for the Democratic Labour Party, Party of Independence, Party of our Borough, a national hero, and it's time for an absolute alternative to either of those established parties in the Friends of Democracy and the People's Coalition for Progress. Why not look at those parties? And they have been putting out messages, however squelched by the enormous messaging machine of the Labour Party, and for all its flaws, the large messaging machine still of the Democratic Labour Party. They're offering a complete alternative and saying, but for our lack of organization, we have something to say.
Friends of Democracy have said to us that they don't want to be the government.
Keeping BLP in check.
They're keeping BLP in check, so they want to be a pressure group.
Opposition.
That's what they've said to us, all right? Because they're not going to be the opposition, so let's be real, all right? So they want to be a pressure group. So they said that to us, so where are we gonna, spend time there voting in a real way? But
So they're not, they should be in the system, because unless you really want to be, you need to be in it to win it. Is that
you
what
need to
you're
be
saying?
in it to win it. Where you enter it, what's going on? This is the way we enter.
We don't vote for pressure groups.
We don't vote for
political-
pressure groups.
Right.
All right.
People's Coalition of Progress, for Progress.
Right.
Inclusive of the United Progressive Party, former, and so on.
They were decorously silent for a long time, and then with the season approaching, they pop up in their various poses and guises, and they say, hey, let's combine.
I'll give you one other name to think about in addition to the three. So there are three to think about, and then they add PCP to that to get accustomed to. No, I mean the three parties are in the PCP, then add the term PCP for it to even further confuse the voters' minds.
That's right. That's right. It's UPP and two others.
And NP and
I was up with a progressive party
Leadership
joining
Party.
ranks with a conservative party. What's
It's
the messaging there?
I don't
It's
even
more
know-
than just
I don't even
alphabet
know-
soup
I don't even
of
know if people think about it that way.
political parties. Let's take a pin in all this discussion right now. We'll be right back with more coverage of Decision 2026 here from Barbados Today.
Welcome to the Western Sales Center, the home of quality products, excellent service, and of course, great prices. Come on, let's check it out. We've extended our product selection to offer a new and exciting range of products, from personal care items to household essentials, to meat and veg, and everything else in between. We are open Monday to Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., giving you plenty of time to browse and stock up. Come on down to the Western Sales Center, the heartbeat of Western, where great quality, products, and excellent prices are in store.
There goes your client, ruining your night's rest again.
I got this.
With our online shop, it's a hassle-free instant booking process for your audio and video equipment. You see availability, set your pickup and drop-off times, and get the final price of your order instantly. Pay via cash, card, or direct bank transfer. We know Miss Panic is definitely getting a markup for ruining your beauty sleep. Summit Media and Event Rentals. Imagine the possibilities.
Life happens, even for the most experienced athletes. That's why Bayview Urgent Care is here. With no appointment needed, you can walk right up to our front desk and be greeted by caring and professional staff who are there to guide you through our intake process. Our dedicated and highly trained nurses and doctors in the urgent care department provide thorough examinations and talk you through the next steps. Need immediate blood work? Bayview Laboratory is conveniently located on the second floor. Need x-rays or scans? Diagnostic radiology is also located within Bayview Urgent Care. Once you are on the mend and ready to go home, our patient shuttle is able to take you where you need in comfort. Bayview Hospital's new urgent care is perfectly equipped to provide you with a full circle of care. Call us at 433-9999 to find out more.
Voter turnout across St. Michael's Central, North and South was steady but relatively low during the morning hours, picking up around midday and again in the final minutes before polls closed at 6 p.m. Most electors described the process as smooth and efficient from entrance to exit, though a few said it felt tedious and drawn out. After casting her ballot at the Eden Lodge Primary School in St. Michael North, Prime Minister Mia Mottley described the system as thorough. She noted that her identification card was checked 3 times and her ID number verified twice, explaining that since Barbados does not use the ink system, multiple checkpoints are necessary to ensure accuracy. Elderly voters, including those using wheelchairs, canes, and those who are visually impaired, also gave the process high marks. Returning officers from the Electoral and Boundaries Commission reported that polling stations closed promptly at 6 p.m., with CARICOM election observers present at several locations, including the Seventh-day Adventist Secondary School, as voting came to an end. Reporting for Barbados Today, I'm Lurian Graham. St. John is back in focus as one of the constituencies to watch in the final days of the campaign. Democratic Labour Party leader Ralph Thorne is contesting the seat, which has traditionally been viewed as DLP leaning, but was captured by the Barbados Labour Party during the clean sweeps of 2018 and 2022. Incumbent Charles Griffith is seeking to hold the seat for the BLP, while People's Coalition Party leader Kimar Stewart is also in the race. With history, leadership and party momentum all intersecting here, St. John is a constituency many will be tracking closely.
St. Philip West, crowded field. St. Philip West is drawing sustained attention as one of the most crowded and competitive races in this election. The field includes Barbados Labour Party candidate Kay McConney, former Democratic Labour Party Minister David Estwick, the People's Coalition Party's Lynette Eastmond, who once challenged Dr. Estwick under the BLP banner and stood against McConney for the United Progressive Party, and the Friends of Democracy leader Karina Goodridge. With the multiple candidates bringing different political histories and appeals, voter choice here is wide open. In a constituency with no shortage of variables, St. Philip West is one many will be watching right down to the final count.
St. Michael's Central is firmly on the radar as a transition seat heading into Election Day. The race features Barbados Labour Party candidate Tyra Trutman, who stepped into the seat following the resignation of longtime MP and Speaker Arthur Holder, alongside Democratic Labour Party's Andre Worrell, Friends of Democracy's Raymond Wiggins, and Anthony Hines of the People's Coalition Party. With the constituency having changed hands in recent years, attention is focused on whether voters opt for continuity or another shift. This is one race where past movement adds to present uncertainty.
Now coming up on 11 o'clock, 3 minutes away from 11, let's bring you up to speed on where we are with the results so far as they've come in from the various constituencies. Let's look at St. Lucie. It's the closest run thing right now for a night in which the Labour Party has been romping ahead. So far in St. Lucie, though, that's remained rather static with a 50-vote margin between Peter Phillips of the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party's Ian Griffith. With now the Friends of Democracy showing up with 8 votes for the FOD and the PCP's Wayne Griffith polling 22 votes. That's the picture there in St. Lucie, Labour lead so far. In St. Michael Northeast, and the Labour Party's candidate, who just happens to be the Prime Minister of Barbados until a new Prime Minister is sworn in. Meet the new boss, might very well be the same as the old boss, where Mia Amor-Motley is well ahead of Janelle Sandiford of the Democratic Labour Party, as widely expected in St. Michael Northeast. That looks like constituency, as we count them so far. 22 votes there for the independent, Doreen Howard so far. She'll be very pleased that she has 22 people who feel none of the above will do and will vote for her. Let's look at the situation now in St. Michael West, where Chris Gibbs, it's still, that picture hasn't changed very much. Chris Gibbs, 116 votes and 31 votes thus far for Damien Thanis of the Democratic Labour Party. Labour ahead and holding on in St. Michael West. That's the picture there with a long night still ahead. St. Michael South, a much stronger showing for Kirk Humphrey, but also to be expected, who showing not only just the popularity of the party leader, but also his own personal party, you'd have to say, in that constituency in St. Michael South. We haven't seen other St. Michael, the other one which is next to that, St. Michael South Central, just yet. But we also have St. Michael Southeast, where vote had come in very early with Santia Bradshaw very well ahead and now pulling even further ahead. That will have to call Labour's first outright victory if the numbers are what I see. Let me just get a quick check from Corey Sandiford.
So she got 2786 in 2022, Santia Bradshaw did, whereas the DLP, Pedro Shepherd in 2022 as well, he got 699 total. He looks on track to get about the same thing or similar. The Joseph Atherley's, Reverend Joseph Atherley's party in that constituency in 2022 getting 180 votes. So just mentioning that that party is not running this time.
Right. So I mean, can we at least therefore call St. Michael Southeast?
Yeah, for sure.
30,000, you certainly can.
So we have our first, let's call it Barbados Today projects that St. Michael Southeast will be Labour whole victory for Santia Bradshaw, well ahead of and again, the Pedro Shepherd of the Democratic Labour Party performing just as he did in 2022. So that's a Labour hold for St. Michael Southeast. Let's now look at the picture in Christchurch East Central, where the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ryan Strawn, is well ahead of Quincy Jones, who was challenging him for the Democratic Labour Party, with 39 votes for Dominique York of the FOD and 20 votes for Natalie Parks. How's that looking, Corey Sandiford?
This is
Christchurch East Central.
Christchurch East Central.
And these are the first returns we're getting for Christchurch East Central.
So in 2022, Ryan Strawn was along with 2,969 votes. The DLP on that occasion polled 1294 to the BLP's 2969. And you had the Barbados Free Party, 73 votes. The APP at the time, Sean Tudor, polled 180 votes in that constituency. And again, the APP is not in the running this time.
Right. So the trend is very strongly for Christchurch East Central remaining in the Labour cap, as currently we can at least, can we call that as well? At this stage?
Why not? I mean, you see where things are headed. I don't think they will get near 3,000 votes that they did last time. But and bear in mind that the electoral, the overall number of voters in the constituency probably increased. So they wouldn't get 3,000 votes, and that would be a smaller percentage overall in terms of voter turnout.
And again, despite the change of the other third parties, pretty much performance pretty much the same for the Democratic Labour Party candidate.
Yes, well, probably less on this occasion, to be honest. I mean, that balance of power that we just saw flash across the screen, that has to be depressing for opposing parties when the whole thing is red. I mean, well, there's one seat so far, but still, we don't really see it changing, not appreciably anyhow.
Right.
And then I have to put the question out there: is it a compulsion for these smaller parties? Because we see promise to call them newer parties, not smaller parties.
Yes.
We see these newer parties running not only in elections, but we see them running in by-elections, the turnout as well, and the same lotto numbers coming back.
Right.
So one has to ask, what then? Why does it keep happening? I can agree with Professor that it shows, I forget the exact expression I used earlier, Professor, when we were on, but it shows, a varying of thought. At least you have parties out there that are putting in different ideas to the electorate, and yes, that is important. But at the same time, civic participation, fine, but and that's important. I wouldn't want to take away from that. But at the same time, they're presenting themselves for office, and the outcomes are the same. It's kind of painful to watch, if I'm being honest. There was one more point that I wanted to mention before I pass back to my colleagues, my fellow panelists, is this idea of the Democratic Labour Party and its current branding. Something that, in terms of joining 21st century, as I was mentioning earlier, something that continually upsets me in a person that wants to see the Democratic Labour Party do well, not as a supporter, but just someone who wants to see balance in terms of our governance.
Okay, no, this is very picture gets a second interesting night for us so far. That's a 4-vote margin between Kay McConney of the Barbados Labour Party and David Estwick of the Democratic Labour Party. And you'd have to say that is the first really serious contender for any sort of change in the fortunes for the Democratic Labour Party, if that is the picture in St. Philip West. Let's stay with that for a moment, if you will. St. Philip West, Dr. David Estwick, for all of his brash and some say distasteful way of campaigning in the 21st century, seems to still resonate with voters. And Kay McConney, so far on this projection, so far has a lot of work to do. Bear a thought, though, for the 47 votes for the FOD candidate. And in many cases,
the leader of the Friends of Democracy.
Indeed, the leader of the Friends of Democracy, Karina Goodridge. But it also has to be said, but in many cases, that 47 vote, those 50 votes, those 100 votes can make a difference. So for all of, so we have to be very careful about how we call that. But still, that's really been the very first competitive showing for the evening for the Labour Party. St. Lucie is also in the mix as well. Let's continue, though, to look at the results as they've come in. So that little patch of red belongs to St. Michael Southeast, and you saw all of her names just now: Santia, Josette, O'Mara Bradshaw of the Labour Party. Labour hold in St. Michael Southeast, who won the cockles of her dad's heart, who has been a long-standing stalwart in the Labour Party, to see a comfortable showing. There was never, I don't think, any doubt about her being re-elected, but the figure was also very interesting. Now, to St. Joseph we go, and again, Ryan Brathwaite, new candidate for the Labour Party, replacing Dale Marshall, pulling comfortably ahead so far for Randall Rouse. And that's not looking good. Usually, it's almost even Stephen or the other way around in the early boxes for St. Joseph. Again, it's still very early, but it's not a very comfortable look for the Democratic Labour Party challenger against Ryan Brathwaite. But Ryan Brathwaite will be very pleased that he, as a new candidate, has taken up the mantle left him by St. Joseph. And we spoke earlier about some sense of succession planning, something that politicians don't usually do in our neck of the woods or in many Western democracies. But Ryan Brathwaite clearly has benefited from some level of succession planning by the outgoing Attorney General who will be replaced. And we need to have a little chat about the likely new Attorney General because under our Constitution, a Prime Minister and an Attorney General must be sworn in after a general election. The first two, the other cabinet members can play a little later. So that's a picture in St. Joseph where Ryan Brathwaite is leading quite comfortably against the old stager, Randall Rouse. Now to St. Peter, and Colin Jordan has pulled ahead rather dramatically against Jason Phillips of the Democratic Labour Party. 689 votes for Colin Jordan of the Labour Party, and about 322 votes, half of that vote for Jason Phillips of the Democratic Labour Party. That's in St. Peter, so that's looking also very comfortable. First returns now for Christchurch South. And Christchurch South is also looking extremely good for new candidate Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight, who was the Minister of Responsibility for Culture in the last cabinet, and her first time in the political hustings against Corey Greenwich of the Democratic Labour Party, and single digits for the independents there. But Chantal Monroe-Knight looking extremely comfortable in early returns for Christchurch South. That's the picture of the 14th constituency. We've had one win for St. Michael Southeast, and Christchurch South is the latest community. And now that's Christchurch West, and that's the first we've seen Dr. William Duguid. We saw that early, actually. Christchurch West, Dr. William Duguid hasn't changed position yet against Andrew Cave of the Democratic Labour Party. So that's 744 votes for William Duguid of the Labour Party and just 198 votes for Andrew Cave of the Democratic Labour Party. So that's 14 seats, one already called for Labour. Labour ahead pretty comfortably in 13 seats, or 12 seats rather, and the 13 seats is a much closer situation. Let's continue with our results before we head back to Emmanuel Joseph, who has someone else in the Labour camp to talk to. Adrian Medic Ford in Christchurch West Central, very well ahead of Rashid Belgrave in Christchurch West Central. Labour leading comfortably there for Christchurch West Central for Adrian Ford. That's the situation in Christchurch West Central. Let's see what are the results we have coming in as we're about to join Emmanuel Joseph live on the scene at Robert Street.
Thank you so much, very much, Julius. And I'm sure the people of Barbados will want to know what the atmosphere here is at Robert Street as the results come in, and so far showing the Barbados Labour Party in front. And it's a kind of a mini celebration as the crowd swells here on Robert Street, and the party is beginning here at the BLP headquarters. So that is basically the atmosphere, because it is swiftly, the crowd is swiftly swelling, and people are partying as each result come in, and that show victory for their party, the Barbados Labour Party. So from the Robert Street headquarters of the BLP, this is Emmanuel Joseph for Barbados Today.
The Grantley Adams House on Roebuck Street, with what a difference a few minutes make in the mood on turnout in a political party outing. We're going to head over and find out what's the picture over at George Street in the Democratic Labour Party in a moment. But so far, just to run through the table: St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael North, St. Michael West, St. Andrew, St. Michael South, St. Lucie, St. John, Christchurch West Central, St. Peter, Christchurch East Central, St. Philip West, St. Joseph, and Christchurch South. By my count, that's 14 seats so far. Victory so far to Santia Bradshaw for St. Michael Southeast. That's Barbados Labour Party's projection. The returning officer will make that announcement in due course when the final votes are tallied, but we are comfortably able to predict that Sandy Bradshaw will hold on for Labour in St. Michael Southeast. Now, let's continue with our results as they've come in to us in Christchurch South. That's the picture there. Chantal Monroe has pulled ahead even further now. 617 votes to 186 votes by Corey Greenidge, with 5 votes, we'll call it 23 votes for the independents thus far. So Christchurch South, very much Labour leading there for the BLP's Dr. Chantal Monroe Knight. And the independents there you saw. Christchurch West, William Duguid now has pulled ahead even further and looking quite comfortably against Andrew Cave with 1,479 votes against Andrew Cave and the Democratic Labour Party's 446. So that's the situation in Christchurch West with Dr. William Duguid there, and that's the 15th, by my count, the 15th constituency that we've had a result for thus far this evening. Let's bring in a comment now from up north, and Raheem Augustine Joseph, watching on from a distance in Oxford.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we've said before, it doesn't look the best for the Democratic Labour Party. But I want to sort of go back to what Professor Marshall and the others have been commenting on, and a few things strike out to me. The Democratic Labour Party clearly is not a well-oiled machine and organization. At the very base of it, questions about what do you represent are abound, particularly post 2018, when you have this sort of reversal of the social democratic fabric of the that the party has been built on, whether it be free education, whether it be social services, that sort of social revolutions and the social conscience of Barbados that the DLP stood for. So the DLP has that reckoning right now, and has had for a very long time, that they've just not answered the question of who you are, what do you stand for, what it is, what are your thoughts on how you can recalibrate in your mind the economy if you think that there is high debt, and how do you sort of reconcile the reduction of debt while still living up to the social democratic nature of the Barbadian polity. Questions about climate change in and of itself, and it is sort of asinine, but at the same time intellectually weak to be able to make the arguments that I think Thorne and the others have suggested about these things being buzzwords, as opposed to sort of reorganizing the manner in which it is communicated to agree that yes, these are issues that affect people's real life, and a DLP government will do. The crime, obviously, crime and violence may have been the only thing that is different, whether it be social services, whether it be the public service or public service reform. I could literally go across every single subsector and be confuddled, to use a word that I just created, to answer the question of what it is that the DLP stands for in this modern era and how it is that they've been able to communicate it. I think obviously communication is the second part, but you must know before you communicate. And sometimes I believe that the DLP just does not know. And to be stuck in that sort of relic of the past is only for, and I'm being indelicate here because it is disheartening, but it's as if the DLP is living in a museum reality, such that they want individuals to come in and remember that which they were, as opposed to that which they are currently and what it is that they want to be. And you do not get to a well-oiled machinery by propping up experts. So whether it be Ralph Thorne, whether it be individuals who cross the floor and somehow now have gained, that is not a sort of organic development that must come from among the people, capitalizing on missteps and mishaps of a government and saying, this is an alternative, this is a better view, this is what we will do. This is how we will approach this particular subject matter. And that for me is sort of being the kernel of the continued repeated downfall that we've seen. Because I still believe in the power of ideas. I still believe that nothing is better than a good idea that has met its time. And I've felt, and even reading for the manifesto, and looking for some sort of very concrete understandings and proposals, there is something to be wanting. And therefore, again, after this election, if it is that they do not go back to the drawing board to reassess, to be able to get that ground movement of people and popular support to work through whether it be the branches and the organizations, to deal with this sort of internal fissures, to be able to rebuild, and not just a brand, but the identity of the political party itself, then they stand to reckon to not be a viable option for the people of Barbados, as they have not been in the past two elections. What is interesting for me, though, it would have been what a Yearwood-led Democratic Labour Party, again with more time, would have built there, and also the extent to which that had it been that this sort of two-headed monster that was tried as per their constitution, whether it is that Yearwood had stepped down and sort of said, hey, I'm gonna fall in line, but I want to run that seat again against Sandra Husbands, and to see how he would have fared as a sort of member of the rank and file. But what I fear also is that these candidates that we're speaking about as the upstarts of the Democratic Labour Party, as the future, they are being badly bruised election after election because of the failings of the Democratic Labour Party, such that they become toxic goods. And I think after a while, individuals may also dispense of them because of the continuous election loss. But I'll leave it as that for now.
Continues to underperform in St. John against the Labour Party's Charles Griffith. 892 votes for Charles Griffith, 574 votes for Thorne, with 95 votes for Kimar Stewart of the People's Coalition for Progress, representing the new national parties, the leader of the national party. And so that is a credible showing for him in his outing there in St. John. But again, not looking good for Ralph Thorne. And again, we've been talking about leadership and whether the Democratic Labour Party will have to go back to the drawing board in terms of leadership if this holds and St. John is back in Labour's territory and the leader, Ralph Thorne, is unable to win and gain that seat. So that's the situation in St. John. Let's look at the other results coming in so far. That one that you see at the bottom of the screen represents Barbados today's projection that Santia Bradshaw, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Transport and Works in the last administration, will be returned to the House of Assembly. The actual formal declaration will follow in due course. Now let's look at St. Lucie, and this is an interesting situation where, you know, it started out with neck and neck, and then it started to shift, and it's shifting more dramatically, where the work that the leader of the Labour Party put into campaigning in St. Lucie seemed to be paying off if what we heard earlier from Peter Wickham is correct. As Ian Griffith and 639 against 42 votes for the candidate. Let's just go back there for a moment, if you will, to St. Lucie, and then we'll talk about City of Bridgetown for what asks Don Marshall, but there we are, 885 votes to 639. Now, Corey Sandiford, what's the magic number there, if you would tell me, for St. Lucie?
You're wanting to know what happened in 2022?
Absolutely.
Okay. It just come back to me. I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
Has Pike Corner, and the question is, has Pike Corner, place at Pike Corner, where the DLP traditionally gets its votes in St. Lucie, has that come in yet? If that box isn't coming, there are about 2 or 3 boxes in Pike Corner.
I'm here with you. So in 2022, we had Peter Phillips carrying a seat with 2693 votes, 2,963. Verla de Pisa on that occasion, who ran for the DLP, she got 1688 to Peter Phillips 2693. So he actually won it quite handily. The APP ran, got 124. And that's as much as I can say. Again, for the viewers, APP is not running on this occasion.
Right, but again, still a little too early just yet for St. Lucie?
It's early, but they're creating separation. You have a box. You have the situation which the professor is referring to, where a box can come in and swing things in the other favor. But whereas earlier we had the 99 to 98, now it's starting to sway in favor of the Bs. And based on what we're seeing elsewhere on the electoral map tonight, chances are that it might create more separation, or it might remain close but not swing in favor of the Dems. My eyes for right now continue to be on St. Philip West. I look forward to updates from there, and I think we were going just now to City of Bridgetown.
City of Bridgetown we go, and that would be the 16th constituency that we got results for, where Michael Lashley, first time out this time for the Labour Party, it's away by a canter.
We can call that.
I would call it.
I know, you can't call it yet.
He wants to desperately, because that's a strong showing for the Labour Party. What does that really say? Is their role that ineffective a candidate, or is Michael Ashley that effective a candidate? What does it say to you, Don Marshall?
This is electorally that Mayor Martin and the Barbados Labour Party still remains the force.
Strong leadership, changing times.
Because everyone, we have new candidates to join the.
I'm getting that St. Michael North, we might have as close a result as possible. There in St. Michael North, where Davison Ishmael has pulled ahead dramatically. And let's have a look at the numbers compared to 2022, St. Michael North. Can we say that's the second victory so far this evening?
Well, he's halfway
Okay, you
home.
can also say that the Democratic Party lost votes.
Yeah, let me, so 2022, Davison Ishmael got 2394, that's what he finished with. The Democratic Labour Party on that occasion got 754 votes, so I guess he's trending the same way, looking to see if Dr. Armstrong can inch her way back to the same 754, but I don't see her pulling
It's a lot of
close.
work.
Yeah, she got ground to cover.
Is it enough to call it?
One can say based on the trends that you're seeing elsewhere on the electoral map. Like I said, I do want to have a comment on what Rashid was saying when he was commenting and saying maybe if the Democratic Labour Party had had another year. Just to tell a story very quickly.
If they had, I mean, if Yearwood had had more time.
Oh, if Yearwood had had more time. Okay, all right. I misunderstood the comment.
Right,
Yeah.
Indeed. So before that, let's just say that it seems we can add a second number in that category based to the column for the Labour Party based on what we've seen so far. For Davis and Ishmael, well ahead and performing as expected, as was the case in 2022 for sure, against Dawn-Marie Armstrong. These are the latest tallies for St. John. Charles Griffith ahead by 340 votes against Ralph Thorne. What do you make of that? Let me see how we look at those figures. This is John coming in. That's 1,381 votes for Charles Griffith, 1,043 for Ralph Thorne.
It's clear 1,000.
There's that. He's
quite increased.
I mean, like if you want. So last time Charles Griffith got 2349. The DLP candidate, who was Andrea Worrell, got 1547. So in the end, it's still, I can't do that math in my head, but that's still several hundred votes that separated the two parties in the end. Ralph Thorne is maybe on track to
do better,
do a little bit better, but one would expect him to.
But spare of thought though for the 142 votes for Kim Marster. I mean that has to say something. I mean we may see this as tiny numbers.
No, that's to be hurtful. That has to be hurtful to think.
To Ralph Thorne. Yeah.
No, that has to be hurt. I think that has to be hurtful to Kimar. Yeah.
He's going to lose a deposit.
Yeah. Well. That's what I was going to say. I was just going to say, one would think that he would be making the race a little bit more interesting than what we're seeing here on the screen currently. But I wanted to comment on the Democratic Labour Party and this question of brand and what they're putting out, what they're not putting out. Right. You have more numbers to give.
Christchurch East Central, Ryan Strand, we can call that for the Barbados Labour Party. Ryan Strand at 2,229 votes against Quincy Jones, the challenger for the Democratic Labour Party, with 47 votes for the Friends of Democracy's Dominique York and the People Coalition for Progress, Natalie Parse. So Ryan Strand, the finance minister in the last administration, is set to be the duly elected member for the constituency of Christchurch East Central, and that's the second that we will put into the cap for Labour right now. Christchurch East Central, victory, Barbados Today says, for the Ryan Strand, the finance minister. As we're joined now by our roving reporter, Corinne Smith, over at Commonwealth School.
Thank you, Julius. We have moved from the east and we're now back in a more central location, the Commonwealth School, as you rightfully pointed out, where we've just received another 4 of 8 boxes that we've already received. So we have we've received a total of 8 boxes, results from 8 boxes. And I'm going to share the most recent 4 that were shared by Carlisle Murray, the returning officer. And just to say, it does seem as though at this stage, Tyra Trotman has taken a very commanding lead in the race for St. Michael Central. All right, so box MA3, A to H, Anthony Hines of the PCP secured 6 votes, Tyra Trotman 143, Raymond Wiggins of the Friends of Democracy 14, and Andrea Worrell of the Democratic Labour Party 29. MA3 I to Z, Hines secured 7 votes, Tyra Trotman 102, Wiggins 5, Worrell 29. And box MB1 A to H, Hines secured 2 votes, Tyra Trotman 93, Wiggins 27, Worrell 26. And MB1 I to Z, Hines received 2 votes, to Trotman's 84, Wiggins secured 25, and Worrell secured 31. And in terms of totals, at this point, Hines has amassed a total of 28 votes. Wiggins has amassed 96. Worrell has secured 222. And as I stated before, Tyra Trotman with a commanding lead, a total of 644 votes here in St. Michael Central. Julia?
Commonwealth School, St. Michael Central. And I must say that this is a candidate who was for the Democratic Labour Party, moved over to the Barbados Labour Party. Then there was an infamous video, or not very infamous video, and therefore that seemed to suggest that she was in trouble. She got a ringing endorsement in the primary from the Prime Minister. Don't worry about the youthful indiscretions, and that clearly those youthful indiscretions have not hurt her this evening. She's comfortably ahead in St. Michael Central for the Barbados Labour Party. Let's join Lorianne Graham, who is at DLP headquarters in George Street. What is the latest you can tell us? Have you been able to get any further information about whether the leader of the Democratic Labour Party actually was able to cast his ballot today?
So the information I'm getting, Julius, is that he was not able to cast his vote. His name was on the the Christchurch South list. He disputed it, saying basically that he was registered in Christchurch East and has not been in Christchurch South since 2004. Hence, he refused to vote at that location. We still have not seen him. There's still only one candidate here, who is Mr. Pedro Shepherd, and as we have seen that he is not doing so well currently with the voting. We have a somber mood right now. The people are still a bit optimistic while they are looking on at the countdown right now, but this is how we are right now.
DLP headquarters in George Street. So again, we've got so far 2 seats that we've called for the Labour Party this evening. And again, there's not been any lag in us bringing them to you. There was a lag from the count itself. We only began to get votes being counted and returns coming in at, 6 minutes past 10. So that was a picture. And now in the hour and a half that we've been on, since those returns have started to come in, a picture is emerging. 3 seats so far for the Labour Party. That's Christchurch East Central. We've called for Ryan Strong, the Finance Minister, and the St. Michael Southeast Labour hold for the Deputy Prime Minister, Santia Bradshaw, in St. Michael Southeast, and St. Michael North Labour hold for Davison Ishmael. Those are the 3 that we've called so far. I'm getting a nudge from all sources that we should go ahead and do the same thing for St. Michael Northeast. In fairness to the electoral process and the people who cast ballots not for her, we're not going to join the popularity contest. We're going to make sure that the numbers are there. But yes, I suppose one could say it's extremely unlikely that at this stage the Prime Minister will be toppled from her very, very lofty perch, 717 votes against Jamal Slocum. How many votes? Jamal Sandiford, I beg your pardon. Why did I say that? And the independent Corrine Howard. So with that faux pas, as I seem to be joining the same Prime Minister, making 1 or 2 slips of the tongue, what did the picture show in that constituency? Is the Prime Minister performing, underperforming? Because that's stuck at 770 for quite a while now.
Me, how many votes she got last time?
Yeah.
She was clear 3,000 last time. She got 3216. The Democratic Labour Party candidate got 476 votes. It was Damien Griffith on that occasion. There was a Barbados Free Party candidate. He got 48 votes on that occasion. So will she clear 3,000 this time? I guess that's the only question mark. I mean, still a lot of boxes to come out, obviously, if it's stuck at 770.
There's a rogue box in there that will go harder than the Dem.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
So if you're not saying that, then can we say that it is, that we can add that to the column more easily?
I said what I had to say before, but you wanted to be fair to the people who didn't support.
I did.
Yeah,
I want to be fair. And so I just want to make that the margin is the work that has to be done by the chancellor is sufficient.
I understand. Yeah. No, they can't make that back.
Okay. So the balance of power is looking now for Zip, for the Labour Party in is one big red dot, represented in previous elections here on Barbados today by a sea of red for the map of Barbados. I think we're going to go ahead and add the Prime Minister's constituency in there. I think that's what I'm being told. So that's the 4th constituency so far counted for Mia Motley of the Labour Party. At this stage, the work that would have to be done, even though there are 3,000 odd votes that she polled in the last election, at 717 compared to a smattering of votes of the challenger, it's too heavy a load to be lifted. Now, we called Christchurch East Central earlier for the Finance Minister. That's Labour hold again for the Ranstron and in Christchurch East Central. And the very early and interesting returns just now, we saw Kareem Smith letting us know that St. Michael Central sees Tyra Trotman, who until a few months ago was the Democratic Labour Party candidate, moving across to the Labour Party and is doing very well with 644 votes. Still, it's a populist constituency, lots of votes to be counted, but still performing very well so far.
All right, fine.
In the context of...
Yes, all right, fine. But I'm just making the point, as I was discussing with Professor where we were off camera, the fact that traditionally speaking, it'd be very risky to be placing candidates and then calling an election just like that. I mean, that is not something you see happening. You put in a candidate and then you have an election call immediately the same night as.
Indeed.
So in this instance, you really are seeing the continued popularity of the Prime Minister and her ability to bring home seats, regardless of, I won't want to say regardless of who she put in there. Somebody once told me in the old days when St. John was only ever DLP. Yeah, no, that you could put Flea there and it would have gone to St. John. So that's what we never thought that we would see happen. But
I've heard that animals being inserted in that.
Yeah, so I don't want to take anything away from the candidates, but however, they're new candidates to those areas. In the case of Michael Lashley, he's been a politician before, so he would have his appeal, but they're being put in there, they're calling election the same night, and then they're carrying those seats handily.
Those votes.
A brave leader would have to do that, and a highly popular leader would have to do that, and nobody else. Let's look at the situation in St. George. St. George is starting to come in, both north and south. And a moment ago, we saw this picture in St. George South, St. George North. That's Tony Moore, the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union on some days, the Member of Parliament for St. George North on other days, and she is well ahead of David Warren, the challenger for the Democratic Labour Party in St. George North. 254 votes for Tony Moore against 94 votes for David Warren. And the situation in St. George South, you just saw Dwight Sutherland of the Barbados Labour Party ahead comfortably against Felicia Dujon, who was in St. James North in the last election and the by-election. And now she's gone over to St. George South and underperforming there against the former the erstwhile Minister for Housing, who gave over to Chris Gibbs. But I'm hearing word of an official declaration. Where? Okay, so that's been officially declared. St. Michael Southeast has been officially declared for Santia Bradshaw. The returning officers come out and said that Santia Josette O'Mara Bradshaw has been duly elected to serve in the House of Assembly in this island. The no longer projected, but actually declared winner for Santia Bradshaw. That was the first seat that we called here. Another projected winner, Christchurch East Central, when Ricardo Strong, the finance minister, will be more than likely back at Bay Street. And of course, with the primus inter pares, the first among equals, Mia Motley projected to win, obviously, and comfortably in St. Michael Northeast. So those are our projected wins, and one declared seat, that is St. Michael Southeast, Santia Bradshaw, the Deputy Prime Minister, winning in St. Michael Southeast. That's the first declaration. It is 20 minutes short of midnight. And we've had our first declaration. The first time a returning officer come and said, of all the votes cast, including the spoiled votes, this is the duly elected member. We've really been hammering the Electoral and Boundaries Commission in pretty much the way we did in the 2018 election by not getting the vote out. But again, is our expectation of speed greater in an electronic age, a digital age, than an Electoral and Boundaries Commission can perform given its paper-based system that hasn't changed for decades, for generations?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I'm not sure if you meant the question from your professor, but that's a difficult one because there are aspects of the EBC's work that cannot be electronic. The enumerators going around the island, for example, that's something that took place, that's something that takes mass canvassing. And I don't know if one could look at that process and say this should be faster because there are certain aspects of it that have to be painstaking. And you have to, and then there are other aspects of it that you might want to do electronically, but then you still have to verify in other ways and do cross-checks and so on. So I don't know if that's the issue, but I do know that most of us would have expected that right now in the height of elections that we wouldn't be having the kind of issues that have been arising, which seem unfortunate, but I don't know what the conversation is going to be proceeding from this. If all 30 seats are carried, or 29 are carried, or 28, are we going to say that those seats were all stolen? That's a heck of a job to pull off by misplaced votes.
Yeah, I don't think it would come to that though. I don't think the confidence in what transpired will remain. I just think the question of just making sure that list, that next time around we do better in terms of
the way it's supposed to look.
Yeah, bring it. It wouldn't be perfect, as we know, but bring it within the realm of error that is acceptable. Right? I think this time around there are just too many egregious mistakes. So when you admit there are 8,000 that you've got to scrub clean, that's a high admission. That's a high number, and you don't really want to be anywhere in that kind of vicinity.
And yet, that's really too low, given our assumption about the mess that the list is in.
For me, the number is the number. If it's 8,000, 16,000, it's 24,000, the number is the number.
Right.
But you don't then want to be hearing that there are people such as the professor whose
Well,
names were in that 8,000. I just use the example because you're here next to me.
I think the opposition leader's one is a different one. Because he could
let's look before we go back. I want to go back to Ayo for her comments, but let's look at the situation in St. Peter. Now that's Colin Jordan and Corey. Have a look at the numbers there for me in terms of the performance of Colin Jordan against Jason Phillips of the Democratic Labour Party. Can that too be called for Labour given the performance?
St. Peter.
In fairness to all who gathered ballots.
29.94 for the BLP in 2022, 8.55 for the Democratic Labour Party. That was Alwyn Babb at the time in 2022. And you still had one or two newer parties who ran. MBKA, which I forget what that stands for. New Barbados Kingdom Alliance.
Correct.
75 votes. BSP, which I'm not sure which is, that is 22 votes in 2022.
But there are not enough votes left in the constituency for Jason Phillips to overhaul that figure.
Making up that around near 1,000 votes.
So that's we can call that for St. Peter as we now look to St. Thomas. And the Gregory Nichols, who facing another long-time challenger in the person of Dr. Roderick Hines of the Democratic Labour Party. Gregory Nichols is 700 votes against Roderick Hines. This is the very first returns we've got for St. Thomas. So let's spend a little time on that screen. St. Thomas with Gregory Nichols, 700 votes, again taking over from Cynthia Ford as the outgoing MP and performing as expected for this strong seat, the stronghold of the Labour Party against Dr. Roderick Hines. There, again, comparisons with 2022?
The number of interest here I would start with is the Democratic Labour Party. They got 625, so they didn't poll well. You know, it's a stronghold that you just said, so they didn't poll well in 2022. So that 100 and some odd votes that we just saw there on the screen, that is still projecting to be about the same. I'm not sure if that is 2 polling divisions or 1 or 2 that we just saw on the screen, but it looks like they're not going to perform that much better. It was 2968 for Cynthia Ford in 2022, and we had the BSP Philip Catlin got 98 votes, and there was an independent Samuel Minner who got 88 votes. So not moving the needle one way or the other, but just mentioning those in fairness.
Right. Okay, so that's a picture, and now we've got 20 seats thus far that we've got returns for. The balance of power has now gone up to 5, and making sure that I am calling them correctly for you. That 5 represents St. Michael Northeast in the person of the Prime Minister, Mia Motley, St. Michael North, Davidson Ishmael, who was in the Ministry of Health as a minister in the Ministry of Health, and then St. Michael Southeast, the Deputy Prime Minister, the very first to be not only projected by us, but actually now declared formally to be won by the Deputy Prime Minister there in St. Michael Southeast. St. Peter.
Have we added St. Thomas?
Yeah, we just had St. Thomas.
We're adding St. Thomas, but ahead of that, St. Peter called for the former Labour Minister for Labour in St. Peter, and Christchurch East Central, the Finance Minister, likely to get back into the same old job that he's held in the Ministry of Finance. So St. Thomas is looking also quite likely to be called as our 6th constituency. So we're going to...
It's 55 years since that part. Something has to be said about St. Thomas. Now it's becoming the St. John of the Barbados Labour Party.
And despite the complaints of bad roads, the road to Bridgefield not being fixed for eons.
Not only held, but it continues to perform very well for the Barbados Labour Party. The people remain, in that rating, they've remained loyal to the Barbados Labour Party.
Let me just inject a little history and see if you agree with me. The talk about St. Thomas is, the unusual nature of St. Thomas is that the people, particularly Rock Hall, had the vote much sooner than many other people before universal adult suffrage. That the people of Rock Hall, because of property qualification, held on and supported Hugh Gordon Cummings, the physician, popular physician, and held on to that right through. And that trend of, even though many of those people have been, their descendants now, sitting on that land, but that tradition of going labor isn't just about party popularity, but actually voting, and they were voted well before 1951, and done so for labor consistently. So that's an interesting development.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Because something has to be said about that.
That's interesting because the philosophy of the party has changed quite, and the people have kept, it's almost an organic link between the people that support from that first free area, it's the first
free village,
and right through until this period. That's remarkable, and maybe a study should be done. I find it remarkable because the Barbados Labour Party too went through its own different kinds of orientations and leanings. So if we take the party of Owen Arthur, slightly different in its appeal than say the party of Tom Adams and before him and so on. And so the popularity of the party across the broad social class groups, including the working majority, would have begun with Owen Arthur, and or would have extended with Owen Arthur, let me put it that, and continued on to the current leader. And Rock Hall and the wider St. Thomas remain faithful.
Yes.
Rock Hall also includes Orange Hill, and while that's been a fortress for the Barbados Labour Party, it would be a mistake to treat to St. Thomas as just simply the expression of Orange Hill residents.
No, Orange Hill is not in St. Andrew. I think Orange Hill is in St. Andrew.
Yes, it's in Andrew, but
it's constituency.
With the redrawing of the political map, it's become St. Thomas. But St. Thomas has been historically, that's your point, St. Thomas has been historically loyal to the Conservative Party, which evolved and evolved several iterations to
From Hugh Gordon Cummins right through to Tom Adams.
So through to the Motley BLP that we know today,
right?
Which is a very, very interesting.
So I hope you enjoyed a little history lesson there. How enfranchising people by giving them land early o'clock makes a difference politically in their lives. The city of Bridgetown, St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael Southeast, St. Peter, Christchurch, East Central, and St. Thomas. The map is filling up there. That's our projection so far for victory for the Labour Party or Labour hold in those areas. Again, we're going to go back to some of the areas that have been the most interesting for those who are looking at the fortunes of the challenger, the Democratic Labour Party in St. Lucie, in St. John, and in St. Philip West. Those are the three that we're looking at there. So that's the picture for now. And back to St. Lucie we go. Picture hasn't changed all that much so far, but again, that's been the most competitive so far, one of the more competitive seats for the Labour Party, but still underperforming so far. Let me get a sense of how that looks from the vantage point of the last election and Corey Sandiford's statistical gaze.
Yeah, we had done this one earlier. We had 2693 for Peter Phillips, and we had 1688 for Verla de Pisa.
And since we don't know the boxes, where those boxes, I'm still saying.
You don't know if it's a pie corner effect?
I don't know if pie corner is in there already, they've lost.
Okay.
Let me put it that. If pie corner is already counted, which I don't, and this is 39, it's good night.
Well, the pie corner would not have 200 odd votes in it for the
1998. It's fairly substantial.
It's pretty substantial.
St. Michael West Central, this is the first here that we have on screen.
This is the first now we're seeing for St. Michael West Central. Ayo is very interested in calling it because they think she wants to have an early night, and many of us might want that. But let's look at the situation there. Let's go back to St. James West Central. As James Paul of the Democratic Labour Party, backbencher, underperforming massively against Ian Gooding-Edgell of the Barbados Labour Party, the tourism minister in the last government. Ian Gooding-Edgell for Labour, 441 votes for Ian Gooding-Edgell. This is the first we're seeing of this constituency. St. Michael West Central, that's the 21st constituency to have returns coming in, and it's again Labour leading in St. Michael West Central. In St. James North, and it's the first time we're seeing St. James, and it's a
First St.
it's
James
a raw
constituency.
in St. James, the first St. James, and Barbados today is going to project that Chad Blackman, the Minister for Educational Transformation, has undertaken a transformation of himself politically, already pretty much the same old.
He just got him to get put back in.
So the returning of Chad Blackman, I was trying to try, my pun didn't work there. Charles Worrell, therefore, utterly underperforming against that. So Barbados today now calls with 828 votes. It's an absolute, no more than a romp. That's serious bodily harm being committed against the
But he just
Democratic
came
Party
off
challenger.
winning the by-election there too, so there's.
So there's a by-election effect.
25, 36 in 2022. That would be Edmund Hinkson at
Mhm.
the time.
Yeah.
Charles Worrell, who also ran against Edmund Hinkson in 2022, got 608 to the 25-36 I just said for Edmund Hinkson. By election now was 2793. I'm sorry, 2723 for Chad Blackman. This was May last year, and Felicia Dujon ran in St. James North and for the by-election and got 468 votes.
So we've got 8 constituencies left to be to get returns from, but so far, in 22 of those 830 constituencies, the Barbados Labour Party is leading. Our vote now has gone up to 8. Let's make sure that my list tallies with the control room. So it's St. Michael Northeast, Labour Hold, Mia Motley, St. Michael North, Labour Hold, Davidson Ishmael, St. Michael Southeast, the first actual official declaration and the first projected victory by Barbados today, some time ago, for Sandy Bradshaw, the Deputy Prime Minister. In St. Peter, it's Colin Jordan, the Labour Minister, back again for Labour, and Ryan Strawn for Labour, the Finance Minister, back, according to our tally. The city of Bridgetown, a new candidate in new garb for Michael Lashley in the city of Bridgetown, and Gregory Nichols in St. Thomas, Chad Blackman in St. James North. So that's the count so far, as the map is looking pretty much like the old map in 2022 and in 2018.
North, I would like to see some more of St. James, because we've got St. James North now. I would like to see Central and South.
Central and South.
See how those seats are looking.
Okay, so we hope to get some returns from those constituencies. I haven't seen them yet. Can we look back? Okay, this is the first return we've now got for St. Michael East. And Trevor Prescott, again, the thought was, Trevor Prescott's been there for such a long time, and he's not had the great favor of the Prime Minister in electoral politics and so on, and campaigning. That, I would argue, is a clear victory for Trevor Prescott. So that's the 9th constituency. Again, as they're being urged to call these constituencies on behalf of
He
Barbados
got
today.
2167 in 2022.
So,
Trevor Prescott did.
Just to recap, 2,162 votes in
2167 in
2167.
2022. Yeah, and the LP got 1019. So just cleared 1,000 in 2022.
Trevor Prescott is an enduring figure in Labour Party politics, largely because he has acted many times like a backbencher by challenging the leader and challenging the leader's statements and so on and so forth, and doing that quite boldly.
Is he not the Democratic Party seat holder at one point? Or he was always with the Barbados Civil Party?
I've never known him to be, but
but I'm very young.
Wait, Trevor Prescott.
Well, if you really want to get deep into who was in the Democratic Labour Party back in the day, some other names will come up that we would never have thought that to be the case. But that's again, the Democratic Labour Party was once the party of majority in this country, and no longer is, it would seem, on the performance of the last three general elections.
There's strong community ties with the entire constituency. Both himself and Hamilton Lashley were, as it were, twins. Siamese twins in St. Michael Southeast and St. Michael East.
Yeah. So from Spain to the Ivy.
That's right. One, he with the Israel Level Foundation, and Lashley with the Creative Workshop. And Trevor Prescott has managed to hold fast to the people, and the people have held fast to him. So I think it gives him the independence to speak to conscience from time to time on various policy issues. And it is to the credit of the government that he can, as it were, vote with his conscience, act with his conscience. He has not done so sufficiently to be described as disruptive, but if not, that might have hurt him at the polls. I think people accept that he is his own man, as it were, and will represent their interests as he sees it, aggressively and persuasively.
All right, so the number says 8, but I think we can really say 9. Let's have a quick look at the seat so far. We are pretty comfortable in saying that St. Michael East can now be added as the 9th constituency for Labour. So we've got, let's go back quickly to that screen where we've got, I think they're trying to change it so they can help us out, but we can do it live. I think folks won't mind the absence of theatricality for a moment. City of Bridgetown, St. Michael Northeast, St. Michael Southeast, St. Peter, Christchurch East Central, St. Thomas, St. Michael West Central, St. James North, and St. Michael East. So the very first St. James constituency has come in. We want to know what's happening in St. James West and in St. James South. We also want to see what's happening in some of the other Christchurch constituencies. And we also want to know what's happening in Phillip, the great fortress for the Democratic Labour Party back in the day, with such figures as Harold Blackman in St. Philip South. And that has changed dramatically as more and more people move in. And I have to tell you, it's going to be a long night by our reckoning, because at the last count, it's now 12,000, not 11,000 voters. Again, bloated list or not, that is still going to be one of the long waits for tonight. St. Philip South is a tremendously large populous constituency and is ripe for being carved up. So that's the projection by Barbados today. St. Michael East, Trevor Anthony Prescott, very strong backbencher for Labour in St. Michael East, is the 9th constituency that we've called for Barbados today, with the only formal declaration so far that I've received has been from St. Michael Southeast, Labour hold for Sandia Bradshaw, the Deputy Prime Minister. It's going to change very quickly, very soon. What's the picture in St. Philip West, if we can go back to the situation there, if it's been updated? I'd like to see where the most competitive seat so far has been, as Kay McConney seeks to hold on for that seat. But let's have a look, even though it's not been updated, where St. Philip West is, and we expect that as the votes come in, we will get that updated. But again, what you've seen is all of the figures that we've been able to input. That's the picture in St. Philip West. So no change so far, but it's close.
But I think was the last time we saw it was Dr. Estwick ahead, marginally.
Yes, for quite a long time.
He was marginally ahead. So.
And traditionally, well, let's just say traditionally, the last 2 elections, it was the St. Philip seats, both South and, St. Philip
North and West.
That panels remain.
2 elections? Not 2018. 2018, there weren't any running for any.
I
thought it's only last 2 elections.
That's right.
2022, yes.
2022, yeah. Now we've had to wait a while before we got to a result.
Yeah, let's go now to St. Michael South. We're getting early returns now for St. Michael South. Kirk Humphrey, less being called for the Barbados Labour Party. 1,517 votes as the Democratic Labour Party continues to underperform, with Kirk Humphrey there in the driver's seat against Nathaniel Boyce of the Democratic Labour Party. So that will be the 10th constituency Barbados today is projecting to be a Labour hold for Kirk Humphrey, a popular MP, but also somebody who has the purse strings of the social care ministries and can literally change the fortunes of a family in any constituency, but especially in his own.
What are you saying? I know him to be a fairly strong representative. I don't know if his ministerial portfolio helps him in that way. I think he's a very strong representative. He's always in tune with his constituents, and so no surprises there. And we go back to when he was canvassing the seat formerly held by Frondell Stewart. He had a strong presence there, and that has not waned.
You ran home in 2022.
Yeah, we've got more results coming in for St. George South, and that's looking like another Barbados Labour Party victory for Dwight Sutherland. I'm getting very strong indication that is the case for St. George South, as Dwight Sutherland polling 1,672 votes to 610 votes for Felicia Dujon of the Democratic Labour Party. What's the situation there based on what you
last time around?
Yeah, the last time around.
I think we might have discussed this one, but let's go back to it. St. George, that's South, right?
St. George South.
Yeah. So Dwight Sutherland in 2022, 38, 34 So that's a lot of votes. That's a lot of votes, nearly 4,000 votes. 38-34 in 2022 to the DLP. That was Dawn Marie Armstrong. That time around, she got 982 to 38-34.
St. George South counts what? Areas like South District or where the
Yeah, some Christchurch in it.
yeah, bit of Christchurch,
Yeah. Up by States and St. George, that area around there. Not sure. I don't think Fair Pilgrim falls in there, but the side of the road, what would they call that? The northern side of that road that stretches past Boarding Hall and so on.
But the local difficulty in St. George South, where Dwight Sutherland was facing some difficulties of a personal nature, leading to him walking away from the housing portfolio, hasn't seemed to have harmed him much at all.
Strong representative candidate for this area. You see, there are some candidates by their strong affinities and connections in their riding, that ministerial performance wouldn't help or hinder. In fact, strong ministerial performance may help, but certainly if it's perceived that they've fallen out of favor and with the Prime Minister has lost their ministry, that's not going to really hinder them particularly. I mean, one of the first statements that Dwight made, for example, was that finally I'll have more time to go back into my constituency. And he was seen back into his constituency, re-engaging again and so on. So by the evidence, it has paid off.
So leadership, and this is now the very first figures we're getting from St. Michael South Central. Just as I was about to ask, what's the story there? Marsha Catto, 1,001 votes against Richard Seeley, the former tourism minister under the Dems, 406, and David Gill, who was once with the Dems, moved over to the PCP, of the great Gill family of Carrington Village, still polling 52 votes, but a lot of work there. And St. Michael South is about to come onto the screen, but just for a moment, let's just stay with St. Michael South Central, and then we'll go to St. Michael South. St. Philip South, okay. Well, that's important. That'll be our first return from St. Philip South. That's in Dalware, who is 1,703 votes against Neil Marshall, 855, 47 votes for Omar Smith of the Friends of Democracy, 27 votes for the Barbados Freedom Party, John Wayne Scantlebury. That's the very first. Remember, there are only 12,000 electors in St. Philip South, but not all 12,000 were expected to vote, but still.
What was going on in the to use your term, spare a thought for the DLP camp? Some of these, like these writings that they see coming back, that they thought like travel press, because I'm sure that they would have thought that they had made serious inroads into that constituency as one that they would carry.
Well, how do you define inroads?
I would say St. Michael East, they would have thought, they would be disappointed with this performance.
They would feel that that was a long-standing MP who they could have successfully convinced the electorate that.
But I would have been telling them, keep it real. St. Michael East is travel Prescott's territory. They would have expected St. Philip, as we say, battleground.
They would have expected several of these.
Well, I have learned they're all trending literally the same way they trended in 2020.
But it goes, listen, it also goes to ask the question, how deep is the crisis of the DLP? Is just a crisis of the leadership of Thorne, or can we extend it back even to when? Because Ronnie was the leader of this party for 2 years.
They're putting leaders there that are not doing. They're not growing the party.
Because Friends of Democracy emerge as a protest against what would be for them a disruption of something that was logically unfolding to their betterment. That is the leadership of Ronnie Yearwood. But that's being put to the test even, because I don't know that the obliteration caused by the ascension of Ralph Thorne is of such that the public is making a statement about Ralph Thorne's takeover of the DLP. I think the public is making a statement about not just Thorne, the leader, but the Democratic Labour Party, the organization. Going back to what we were saying earlier, the DLP as a force just simply is not attracting anyone.
But organizations tend to follow the pattern set by a leader.
I'm not going to dispute that, but I'm also saying to you that the party was led, the election was called in 2022. between 22 and 24, it was led by Ronnie Yearwood, who would have been one of the candidates with a statistically better showing in the 22 election. Although it's difficult to talk about good showings when you're obliterated 30 love. So he was seen as a new candidate, so vibrant, etc. Okay. But the problems that we see with the DLP of 2026, we're still there in 2024. That's just the point I'm making, you know. And I don't know that Messrs. Blackett and Yearwood would have made a difference based on based on what we're seeing right now.
Let's pause for a moment. As St. Philip West, the first time we're getting statistics. This is also interesting. Kay McConney pulling ahead a little ahead of David Estwick, and again 142 votes for Karina Gurges of Friends of Democracy. 23 votes as Lynette Eastman has begun to show up for the party in St. Philip West. Now, again, is this a situation likely to be where the support, let's go back to them for a moment, where the support for David Estwick has been siphoned off by the other challenging parties?
It could be that both are suffering from both the Kay McConney. Just that she's in the lead statistically. She's in the lead barely, but it could be that Katrina is cutting votes on both sides. At the same time, I don't know how many boxes remain for me to say one way or the other where this is going. Remember the last time it was trending David Estwick's way until the last few boxes. And although you said 2018, there were St. Philip West was lost to Kay McConney easily. For a while, when we were tracking those boxes in St. Philip West, there was a contest. There was a contest in St. Philip West.
In 2018?
Hold on. I'm saying to you, in 2018, what were the numbers in 2018? We know it's an outlier.
All right, so John King cleared 4,000. You have 4323. BLP had 1924.
So at 2022 was. Kay McConney ran once. Okay. Yes, right.
Let's just pause for a moment because I'm hearing declarations have been made in more constituencies. Let me just. Rommel Springer, hang on, just bear with me as I get this coming into my ear. I'm going to give you the declarations for the constituencies. In St. Andrew, Rommel Springer has been declared the winner for St. Andrew and the Labour Party. So that's Labour hold, I beg your pardon, I'm getting that? There's been a declaration for Kirk Humphrey in St. Michael South. So those are the now declared seats. Mia Motley, the Prime Minister, has now been declared the duly elected member for St. Michael North East. We called it earlier. William Duguid in Christchurch has been declared the victor there, and that's in Christchurch West. And Ryan Strachan has now also been declared the winner for Christchurch East Central. So Dr. William Duguid, we're going to just run this very clearly now. These are the declarations. We've already pulled around 10 seats for the Labour Party so far. But the declarations have been made for, once again, if I can get it from my team behind me, St. Michael Northeast. St. Michael Northeast, if you just call the constituency for me, there's St. Michael Northeast, that's the Prime Minister. Springer, that's St. Andrew, that's the Labour declaration there. St. Michael Northeast. Christchurch West for Dr. William Duguid, that has been declared. Christchurch East Central, that's been declared for Ryan Strachan. That's my count so far. 1, 2, 3, 4 constituencies have been declared. No, 5, because St. Michael Southeast was also declared for Santia Bradshaw, the Deputy Prime Minister. So we've got 5 clear declarations this evening at 14 minutes past midnight. So, the picture just opened up, the gap just opened up, and that's the picture now in St. Joseph. That's another seat that we can call in the Labour Party. Randall Ross has actually seems he's underperformed from what I'm seeing here, from his many years of challenging the status quo for Labour in St. Joseph. So that's St. Joseph. Ryan Brathwaite, Barbados Today, is projecting that will be held by Labour. So that is ahead of a declaration. Indalware is projected to win in St. Philip South. Indalware for Labour in St. Philip South. And so that's the picture. And of course, we called St. Michael East earlier for Trevor Prescott, St. James North for Chad Jason Blackman, St. Thomas for Gregory Nichols, City of Bridgetown for Michael Lashley. We haven't heard from any other St. James constituencies just yet. We hope to get that very soon. We want to know the picture in St. James West, represented by two ministers who actually sit in the same ministry, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, up until the other day when Sandra Husbands was moved over to education and taking care of tertiary training and vocational education. So that's the picture. We've not yet heard from any other St. James constituencies, but we're getting returns already and for St. Philip. So we are calling it for Labour as a Labour hold. So this count now, 15, one more needed to say that the majority has been met and the Barbados Labour Party will be returned to office, and that's an imminent call, I should think. Oh, it's a close run thing. You know, you never really can tell. It's not over till it's over. But I think it has to be said it's been a very, very bad night for the Democrat Labour Party, and any hope of actually having an effective voice in the House of Assembly. St. John is again yet to be called by us, but let's have a look at if there's been any update in situation in St. John. Over to you.
I was just saying, we don't know how it will end up. We don't know if Ralph Thorne will get his seat and that sort of thing. But I think it will become clear from the outcomes tonight and the conversation that we're having, and hopefully the conversation that they're having with themselves, that is not enough for the Democratic Labour Party to wait for people to be tired of the Barbados Labour Party and how business is being done.
Well, that's the picture still in St. John, 1,381 votes against 1,043 for Ralph Thorne, with 142 votes for Kimar Stewart for the leader of the New National Party, turning out for the People's Coalition for Progress. So that's the situation, and again,
we're looking at St. John 2022 to see
what the 2349. I think we did this one. 2349. Andrew World got 1547.
We'll do a quick reset here. We'll take a break and we'll come back and look at where we are, give you the big picture, the balance of power of the seats so far called, seats so far projected, and the likelihood for the rest of the night here on Decision 26, Election Pulse from Barbados Today. Back in a moment.
Welcome to the Western Sales Center, the home of quality products, excellent service, and of course, great prices. Come on, let's check it out. We've extended our product selection to offer a new and exciting range of products, from personal care items to household essentials, to meat and veg, and everything else in between. We are open Monday to Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., giving you plenty of time to browse and stock up. Come on down to the Western Sales Center, the heartbeat of Western, where great quality, products, and excellent prices are in store.
There goes your client, ruining your night's rest. again.
I got this.
With our online shop, it's a hassle-free instant booking process for your audio and video equipment. You see availability, set your pickup and drop-off times, and get the final price of your order instantly. Pay via cash, card, or direct bank transfer. We know Miss Panic is definitely getting a markup for ruining your beauty sleep. Summit Media and Event Rentals. Imagine the possibilities.